Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 79 of the Former Actionist Podcast, and I'm your host, Justin Kramer. This week I have on Gunner Michael Carr. He's Chief Warrant Officer 4, retired from the United States Marine Corps. If you don't know what a gunner is, go back and check out, well, I can tell you real quick. He's basically in charge of he's a specialist of all the infantry weapons or weapon systems within the Marine Corps. And, they get used a lot to set up ranges and make, do stuff like that. Great dude. He was also a scout sniper. He was an instructor at SOTG or EOTG, depending on what era you were in, for the RNS course. And he also did the raids course. We get into that a little bit, more than a little bit. We talk about him working at EOTG with the raids because last episode, well, first off, if you haven't heard him already, he was already on here on episode 66. So you can get some more of his background on episode 66, talk about when he first comes in and stuff like that. This one, obviously we covered a lot of stuff in the last one. So this one we jump into him at SOTG, and he was actually an instructor when... From the last episode, episode 78, we had Captain Daniel Gordon on, who had gone through with 1-8. He'd gone through the SOTG package before going to Iraq to the invasion when 1-8 went to Mosul. Well, I guess during that whole training time, some boats got damaged. Some of the boats from the boat raid course got damaged, and some stuff happened, and there was supposed to be a jump. Michael Carr was supposed to jump, him and a couple other guys, and that got delayed because they had to stay back and deal with the whole issues with the raid package and the course and stuff like that. So they didn't get to jump that day. Turns out that a rigger was upset with his commanding officer and cut the risers on a bunch of chutes, and the 4 jumpers that jumped that day, all 4 of them, their main chutes failed. And so that's just how circumstances are. We get into that story, and it's crazy, man. And he talks about going to Somalia. He was in Somalia after the whole Black Hawk Down stuff and everything like that. He was out there helping to reinforce the embassy. And we talk about some of the combatants that they dealt with, some of the different weapon systems that they were dealing with and stuff like that. Really great conversation. Glad he came back on. And yeah, so hey, as always, make sure to check out my Instagram page at Former Action Guys and at J Kramer Graphics both. Also, let me real quick. I think I got a couple more comments. Yep. Okay. So on Apple Podcasts, as I mentioned multiple times, you can leave reviews on Apple Podcasts. It's basically the only platform you can. You can also go on YouTube and leave comments under the videos there, so feel free to do that as well. But Apple Podcasts, hey, I'm up to 85 straight 5-star reviews. Thank every one of you that has gone on there and done that. I can't tell you how much that helps the podcast. It helps bring it up in the ratings. It helps it get exposed to other people. So by leaving reviews, and especially a written review, you're helping me out. Please also help out by sharing the show and telling other people about it. But to the reviews here, on Sunday, I had Flash0202 come in and say, amazing podcast. Justin does a great job directing and steering the podcast so viewers get the most out of the show. He's very easy to talk to. And is genuinely interested in hearing your story. The variety and depth of his interviews is amazing. He has guys with all types of backgrounds and experience. For military guys who have done these things to someone with no military experience, there's a wealth of knowledge and real life stories that will entertain everyone. Appreciate the review. I do try to bring on, I know a lot of the guys that come on are Anglico guys. A lot of the guys are fire support people. I'm trying to branch out a little bit more. I feel like we do a pretty good job of having a variety of guests on. I've had some law enforcement officers that aren't involved with the military at all come on. A really good one was when I had let me go back and look. I'll look at it later. Anyway, what I'm trying to get at is I do try to have a bunch of people on. I appreciate the comment there. The variety is what's going to keep the podcast entertaining, and it just kind of shows us what everyone else out there, what's their piece of the pie, how are they helping the fight, how are we all working towards that same goal, and kind of their role in it. So it's very interesting for me to have on all these different people because I continually learn more and more about not just the military, but maybe specific battles, weapon systems, stuff like that. So for me, it's really interesting, and I'm glad you guys are interested in it too. Second review is from Andrew.Rose711. I have enjoyed many of these episodes, but it's always great to listen to one with a friend I served with, Greg Wraith. great interviewers, and currently looking for some Apache pilots for the guys to interview. I look forward to you know what? I think I already read this one. That was actually, I think I read that on the last podcast. But again, hey, thanks for the comment. Thanks for the review. You get yours read out there twice. It reminded me when I saw that Apache pilots. Yeah, I'm still waiting for them to get done with training, and then we're going to set something up to have somebody like that. For those of you out there that have somebody that may be a great person to interview, hey, shoot me their information. You have them listen to a podcast episode or two, see if they even like it. And if they're interested in it, have them email me, jkramermedia@gmail.com. Have them email me over kind of like just a quick bio, nothing crazy, just like, hey, I was at this unit from this year to this year. And we can go from there and maybe set something up. I'm always looking for new guests and interesting conversations to have. So please send that stuff to me at jkramermedia@gmail.com. Outside of that, man, always make sure to subscribe on my YouTube channel, because that also is helping out. I've had a bunch of subscriptions jumping in lately, so appreciate everybody that's been doing that. And yeah, I'm not gonna take up any more time, so enjoy the podcast. I started a bunch of polls on my Instagram stories. I guess 2nd Marine Division decided to. Let me turn this down just a little bit. I guess 2nd Marine Division decided to have the JTACs change their call sign. When I was there, we were called Templar. And there's obviously like a knight logo. And it sounds like they're making them change it because of the whole Crusader, knight, Templar, all that stuff. So they're making them change the call sign for the 2nd Marine Division JTACs from Templar to something else. And so I started a poll on my Instagram stories to see what people think. The first the first submission was Templar. Yep. I think they should keep it. So, of course, right?
I've been doing good.
So, man, how you been? Good, dude. Crazy. I mean, we start the podcast, but I feel like we ought to at least touch on the fact that the President of the United States has coronavirus and his wife as
crazy.
well. Pretty wild, huh?
What
a weird time we live in, and what a crazy time, like 2020, what he gets coronavirus right in the middle of the campaign season and stuff like that. It's just what a crazy year. For me, I was talking to my buddy Jonathan Frazier this morning, and he put a post up on his Facebook page. It said, if you were someone that was celebrating RBG's death, Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death, but now you're mad that people are saying something about Trump having I know a guy named Trumpler, Trump having coronavirus, and there's some people like, oh, I hope he dies from it and stuff like that. If you celebrated RBG's death, but you're saying that's wrong, then you're part of the problem. That's part of the issue there. Like, it's fucked up that we celebrate anyone being sick or dead or anything like that. So I just wanted to throw that out there at the beginning so my listeners know my stance on it. Be a good fucking person. Don't be an asshole. I can't imagine, can you imagine taking a test and then they come back with the results, especially someone like him. He gets tested probably multiple times a day, and babe, negative. Oh, hey, you're positive. I wonder what goes through your mind, especially at his age. He's in his upper 70s. I think he's 77. He's obviously overweight and stuff like that. He's in the crazy, man. 2020 just can't. I just don't know if it can get crazy.
I try to stay off media, or not media, but all the news and just live my life and be, try to be a better self today than I was yesterday, and and just try to be nice to people as much as you can. I was talking to my mom the other day, because I've been doing these 22 push-ups a day thing, and I've incorporated what you said, and so I'm actually texting or calling or sending some kind of message to guys that I served with and I haven't talked to in a while. So each day I'm doing the push-ups, as soon as I get off, I send a message to somebody saying, hey, how you doing? What's going on? And just kind of get the feelers out there, just so they know, hey, if you have any issues, just get a hold of me. I'll always be here for you.
That's cool, man. Yeah, that's something for sure. I've mentioned a few times that the 22 push-ups, that's cool, I guess. You're bringing some, but the thing with that is you're bringing awareness to it to people that already are in that. Who outside of the military does really care about that or anything? it's for sure contacting people is the better way to go. That's cool. Have you had a lot of good, like, I don't know, were people surprised when you hit them up, or was it, how the conversations go?
Well, they're all were good. Some of them were just like, hey, doing well, staying busy, short, but not, then I just like, hey, let you know that I love you and I'm out here, I'm here for you if you need it. Then others were, one of the guys I was in Somalia with, we had about an hour and a half conversation, and it seemed like it was
cool.
Not that he was suicidal at all, but it was just our conversation was allowing him to vent because he's up, in Idaho. And it just seemed like it was the right time. I, got a hold of him, talked to him. We've touched base periodically, every couple of months. We usually, send a text, and usually we text a little bit, and then he's like, forget it, man. It's too much to text, and we just talk, and we end up talking for an hour, hour and a half or something. So that went real well also.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. And, like you said, I think that's what a lot of guys need, is just someone to vent to, because you leave the service and you go out to the real world. And I think we talked about it a little bit in the last podcast about, trying to relate with people back home. And it's just hard to, because the people back home, like if you get out of the military and go back home, they've never left, for the most part. They're all the same people. They've never left the area, or, permanently at least, or, while on the other hand, you're moving or you're going to other countries and you're seeing all these things. And it's hard to like come back and talk to people about that, because, and I'm not even talking about like, oh, I'm concerned, I want to have a conversation with someone because I don't feel right. But for me, I don't even talk to people about like going to Hong Kong or Singapore that much, because I feel like I'm rubbing it in, like, ha ha ha, I got to go, to all these cool places, loser. And that's not my intention, but that's the way it kind of comes off, because you got to do all these crazy things. And it just, for me, it becomes one of those things where it's like, you know what, I just don't even, unless I'm talking to a military person, I don't even really like to discuss it unless someone asks me. If someone asks me a question, I'm definitely going to talk about it for sure. But yeah, man, guys and gals, they just need to have a place to vent. And I think this podcast has been great for me and great for guys like you and stuff like that. And the other good thing I've heard feedback, and this may or may not be true in your case, but guys have texted me afterwards and are like, oh, dude, one of my buddies saw me on the podcast and hit me up, like, blah, 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 blah. I had all these people reaching out to me, and, and I was like, that's cool, man. That's like, the circle is small, and, all those people are still out there. So
most definitely
keep in contact.
It's funny how you talk about, try not to, it seemed like you're rubbing something in. So on my last MEU, the fourth MEU that I did, I was the battalion gunner, and we got sent forward to, it was Kenya, to do a planning conference. And for whatever reason, the dates got shifted by 4 or 5 days, and everybody else, except for me and I think she was the MEU, or not the MEU, she was the CLB 3 Alpha. So she was, like plans for them. And we're the only two that couldn't get our flights changed. So we show up, and everybody from the embassy is like, where's everybody else at? We're expecting like 10 people. We have all this stuff set up for you. And we're like, well, it's just us. Everybody else got their stuff changed. So long story short is we ended up going on safari. And she's like, oh my gosh, this is a once in a lifetime chance. And I just put my head down, and by then she like knew me. She's like, what? And I was like, or in my case, it's twice in a lifetime chance. When I flew into Somalia, we stopped there because it was myself, my platoon commander, and one of the other sergeants. We stopped in Kenya. That's where we got off commercial aircraft, and we ended up flying in on a CIA bird or whatever it was from there. But we had a 2 or 3 day layover. It was actually the same day. I got up that first day there, and we saw this. I think we might have mentioned on the last podcast about seeing the white Bronco driving down I-90 or whatever it is out in California. The I-10 or whatever it is, and I-5, and we're like
I-5.
Didn't know what it was until we came back, and it was O.J. Simpson. But while we're there, we got to do that same safari. So that was the first time, and then years later went back to see that same safari, which was cool.
That is cool. What's that? I've always wanted to do a safari. What do you do? Like, how does that whole thing go? Do you go and jump in the back of an old Land Rover and cruise around and see animals, or was it more than that?
We only did a half day one because we didn't have a lot of time, really, I guess is what it was. And so we just jumped in the back, and they had a specific route that they drove. we didn't get to see any lions. I got to see all kinds of giraffes, elephants, antelope, wildebeest, rhinos, just a wide variety of the animals and all kinds of different birds. We saw gators or crocodiles or whatever there was.
Mm-hmm. Was that on
It was.
Is it in a park? Is it in
was.
like their version of a national park or okay?
It was. Yeah.
That's sick, man. I've always wanted to go do that. Have you heard of? There's an organization. I follow them on Instagram. I need to reach out to them. There's an organization on Instagram
I have not.
called VetPaw. Have you seen that? Yeah, to check it out. I've been following them for a little while. Like I said, they get basically. It seems like it seems like veterans that are over in Africa. I can't remember. I'm not sure if it's South Africa or Kenya or something like that, but. They are protecting like the rhinoceroses and stuff from the poachers coming out and cutting their horns off. And I'm like, dude, that is a super cool, like, I mean, get out of the military and go do something like that. Like that, what a cool thing to do. And I totally support that. So if those people here, if anybody knows anyone involved in that organization, I totally would have one of them on the podcast to talk about it. But I think that's what an interesting job. What an interesting, like, I don't know, thing to do to go live with the animals and protect them and stuff like that, that's really cool. What was the coolest thing you saw on your safari?
Probably the rhino with the baby rhino.
Yeah, closest thing I've ever got to that is the safari park at San Diego Zoo. Riding a little bus around and seeing them. Not the same, I'm sure. So yeah, man, thanks again for coming on the podcast. Like I said, crazy times we're living in. We're in the middle of the election season. Got the president has coronavirus. Got the debates were wild the other night. I don't know if you watched them or not. Those are crazy. Just a bunch of shenanigans going on. And then this morning, I was kind of bummed when I saw that they're changing the 2nd Marine Division call sign for the JTACs. So I did want to bring that up. So, I think anybody gets a little bummed out when their old unit changes their call sign for whatever reason.
Yeah, talking about call signs, so that. I don't know what email address I sent you, but the blaster one, the blaster part was 3 6s call sign for the sniper platoon when I got there, and they had it previously when they were in Somalia, and they had guys gotten kills with that call sign. So we're like, yes, we got to keep this call sign, the lineage and the heritage of.
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. I mean, if they're gonna change it, I hope they at least change it to something that's like Templar's cool, but. Let's at least have the new one tie it to like a famous battle or something that fire supporters had a big deal in. I don't know. There was Marja. There was a lot of stuff that happened in Marja. There was a lot of arty and stuff shot in Marja. 2nd Marine Division was a huge part of the whole Marja thing. So stuff like that. Hopefully they pick something in that realm. Go ahead.
So like every JTAC in the 2nd Marine Division, is that like Templar 1 through like 100, or is it?
Yeah,
that's
something like that. Yeah, and this is and that's only for like stateside stuff. Like obviously when they go overseas, they get their. Well, I don't know how it works now, and obviously every war is going to be different. But Afghanistan, the way that worked is you went to Afghanistan. When you first got there, you go to Leatherneck. You meet up with the probably division or maybe red or higher, I don't know, maybe MEF air person, like the Arrow or something like that. And you have to take a safety test. And then once you go through and do the safety test and you do an ROE test, like the rules of engagement test, so you understand all the different ROEs specific to Afghanistan and how to employ them. Like there's like a, self-defense. There's multiple ones that you could use. And what's my justification for dropping? So you'd have to put the ROE at the end of your control of what justification you're using to drop. But during all that, that's when they tell you what call sign you have. And I don't know which ones are still active. Mine was Siege 2-2. I doubt they still use that. They rotate. Guys had different ones. And specific units like Anglico, MARSOC, they have a call sign that doesn't change. Like their call sign is not meaning from stateside to over there, but over there, every person in that unit has the same call sign and then their specific number. Whereas like for me, Siege 2-2 was for everybody within that RCT's AO or Siege, people. So that's kind of how the call sign game worked over there for that. So you reached out to me. You were talking about, we never got into your time at SOTG and stuff like that, and you shot me a message, you know, about how you were listening to the last podcast I did, and how you guys kind of cross paths there unknowingly. So you wanna kind of talk about one. Well, okay. You want to go ahead and talk about one, like what SOTG is?
It is.
I think it's EOTG now. I think they changed it. Yeah. You want to explain that for people that may not understand what that is or what that group does, and then we'll get into like how you and Captain Daniel Gordon from episode 78 kind of cross paths without knowing.
So SOTG, that stands for Special Operations Training Group. Now it's Expeditionary Operations Training Group. And it's broken up in a couple different branches. You have the Amphibious Raids branch where I was when I met him. There is Special Missions branch, which I think is no more, or if it is, they call it something else. When MARSOC stood up, they took that whole branch and moved it over, and that started like the MARSOC schools and stuff. They do the RNS, Urban Sniper, CQB, Covering Force course. They're the ones that certify the Maritime Special Purpose Force, which we kind of talked about on the last podcast. There's also a mountain section that does the Assault Climbers course, the Hurst courses. They send all their guys the summer and winter mountain warfare stuff, so they're all like the mountains, and then they also throw like this, like the Hurst stuff in there because it's ropes and all that. There is a non-lethal section that teaches all the different non-lethal courses to units across the MU. And back then there was a Riverine Training Center which did all Riverine stuff, and that's where the OTH course that he went to, Over the Horizon Navigation course, that's where they were housed at. Was there because that's where the RACs, and I don't remember what the heck the RAC stood for. That was the larger, think of like almost like a Vietnam era style big boat, large engines.
Oh, okay.
Those guys did that. They also sent MTTs out of there. They also sent MTTs down to Central and South America.
Okay, and that's the mobile training teams, right? Isn't that what MTT stands for? Okay. Now, if you're an instructor there, one, is there any kind of selection or anything to become an instructor there, or is it just something you're like, hey, I'm coming up for orders, I'd like to go to EOTG? And two, do you know like what kind of MOSs are at that schoolhouse or at that training facility? Yes,
there was a selection, and that goes back to a previous unit I was at. I was at SOI at Advanced Infantry Training Company. So we had all the advanced courses: Squad Leader School, Platoon Sergeant School, Advanced Machine Guns, Mortars. And when I got there, I was teaching advanced machine guns, but I was on a FAP, Fleet Assistance Program. So I went from 3.6 to there because at that point I'd been in about 10 years. Just got back from my third major deployment, plus Somalia with Fast Company, plus 2 refuel defuel missions with Fast Company. We did another special mission there. So in 10 years, we got there. We hadn't even hit my overseas control date, let alone 3 years from my overseas control date at that point. And that's why they're like, hey, we're sending you because you need a break. So I was over there, and I came to work one day, and getting out of my truck, and Staff Sergeant Delgado was one of the guys from in the course I was at. And he's like, hey, Carr, you habla Espanol? And I was like, nope. I was like, why? He's like, because we have orders. I was like, well, I'm on a FAP. He's like, well, I guess they're fapping you from that FAP. And I was like, so what are we doing? He's like, well, he's talking about himself. He's like, I'm going to be the Force Protection Specialist. I was like, oh, cool. What am I going to be doing? He's like, you're going to be the Assistant OIC to the Joint Peruvian Riverine Training Center. I was like, all righty. So let's go find this. So we went in and found out about that. I went to my sergeant major there with him, and I'm like, hey, man, I'm on a FAP. I'm not supposed to be deploying. My overseas control date's way out. And he was not having any of it. I'll see what I can do. But again, he was like a regimental sergeant major is what the school sergeant major is equivalent to. And in the end, I got out of going it because my overseas control date was so crazy, and I didn't speak Spanish. But in that, we had to go out to SOTG. That's where we're going to deploy from. And I got out there and met those guys. We were dealing with them for a couple weeks. A couple of days. Because this was like a Tuesday, and they said we were deploying for 6 months that following Monday. And I was like, whoa, We went over to SOTG, and they're like, so what's your rifle serial number? I was like, we don't have rifles. We're at the schoolhouse. we have just enough rifles to send a couple guys,
Mm-hmm.
for the students, and then send guys to the rifle range. We don't have issued a rifle. Like, you're a Marine, every Marine's got a rifleman, every Marine's got a rifle. And then finally it was like, he was like, what's your serial number? So I was like, put on my pocket to my laser pointer, and I was like, 0, 2, 1. Like, what are you doing? I was like, we're instructors. And I was like, hit the laser, and I was like, we just have lasers. We don't have weapons. That's when the light bulb clicked off. Oh, these dudes aren't from the fleet. They're from a training command, and this is a lot more. They actually had us set to go. The other guy went. My sergeant major from my parent command, 3-6, got me out of it. But we were going to D.C. on a Friday morning to get our government passports in a day, because it was like, kind of rush mission.
Oh, wow.
But in that interaction with SOTG, that's where they met me, they knew me. And then when the slot opened up, they said, well, Carr will put your name down, but we need you to go out there and do an interview. So when I get out there, they're like, oh, shit, we know you. You're good. We don't even need to do an interview. Yeah.
You're that dude.
So that's how, so for
that's
me,
cool.
And then for the other half of your question was the MOSs. At amphibious raids, you had to be in 03 something. 03, 11, 31, 41, 51. But they wanted you to have experience with the MEU. They didn't want to have guys just coming in like, okay. So, and so when I sat down, like, okay, we're sending it out to the beach. What rate, what experience do you have? And I was like, well, I did 2 MEUs as in a rifle company, 1 MEU doing the RNS and the sniper platoon. And like, oh, shoot, well, the MEUs. Like, so who was teaching your raid courses? I was like, we didn't have raid courses. We just, that's part of the turnover that we had was you kept your senior, NCOs and staff NCOs, and as well as officers. So the two, you had 4 platoon commanders, 1st, 2nd, 3rd platoon, and then weapons platoon. And out of that next deployment, 2 of those platoon commanders stayed. One went to be weapons, one went to be the XO. So you had continuity within your company of why the SOP was whatever. I was like, we never had a raid course from SOTG. They evaluated us in the end to see if we were certified to go on the MEU and we're capable of doing, like, for my company, the helo raids. Same thing with the boats. They had, went through and evaluated you, but we didn't have a course on how to do a raid. And so that was just inherent, of what we did. And that's why 8th Marines were the only ones doing the MEU. So it was that continuity rolling over. But they
okay. I guess it makes more sense in that way that there's really only one regiment that's covering down on the MEU. So the what do you call it? The knowledge base is like maintaining within that unit. I guess that makes sense, but kind of, there should definitely be, like, at the schoolhouse, somebody teaching here's the baseline, what everybody should know.
So when I got there, that's what I was teaching. We started teaching raid courses because they didn't have it at one regiment at that point. And I got there in June of 2000. They were teaching raid courses for all the different specific ones because by then everybody was rotating through. So any unit. So that was when I first got there. I went out to the beach and I taught the Zodiac coxswain course, the Scout swimmer course, and then all the raid courses.
What do you think is the hardest part about being in a boat company and doing these amphibious
What's the
raids?
hardest part?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, the way we focused on it was whatever mode it was, that's just to get you to do the job. You know what I'm saying? But the coordination between the rifle company, so the courses that are taught, the guys go through in the boat company, you have the Zodiac coxswain course, which I taught. That was a 4-week-long course. That next week, we kept a handful of guys from the coxswain course, which was from their company, and they drove the boats. So if some guy needed like a little bit more experience, he pretty much had it, but we want to give him a little bit more time on the stick. We had him come and drive for us during the Scout Swimmer course, which was guys that were from that same company. And then that was a 2-week-long
Okay, that
course.
makes sense.
And then a little while later, we had what was called the boat interop course. And that was a 2-week-long course. The first week was integrating together. The second week was actually the boat company's raid course. So like Monday and I think some into Tuesday, might have even been a little bit into Wednesday. That was the first time that the swimmers, the coxswains, and the over the horizon navigators came together as the company's unit, that's going to get them from ship to shore. So all the while that we were doing the swimmer course and the coxswain course, the OTH guys are over at the Riverine Training Center learning OTH. And so this is the first time we were kind of coming together.
Can you kind of explain, we talked about it a little bit, like I said, on the last episode, but can you kind of explain the differences and what those different roles are and what job they perform within the boat company? So like your coxswains, your over-the-horizon navigators, and your scout swimmers.
So the coxswains are the guys that are going to drive the boats, and we end up, usually a company back then, I don't know, the East Coast stopped having boat companies. I don't know if they're going to go back or not. The West Coast continued on, I think more because they were still doing stuff in like the Philippines and, Thailand or wherever else where there was in littorals, and there was those countries had boat forces that they could, kind of can cross train and train with. So for us, usually they had 20 boats, whether they used 20 or all 20 or not, Zodiac, F470 Zodiacs. And then, so they're the ones that drove it. Usually had a coxswain and a coxswain in each boat. So they're the ones that were responsible for that boat, the engines, and the care of it. And a lot of times when we went ashore, they stayed back at the beach landing site, the BLS, and did security and, kept an eye on the boats. And if something happened where the raid force had to exfil somewhere, some other way, either by helos or something else, they were there at the boats to turn around and launch and get those boats back out to sea. The scout swimmers, their main job was literally scout for you're killing me. Hold on a second. Can we pause here for a second? My daughter's calling. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. That's fine.
Back?
We'll pause. Yep,
okay.
Back on.
Sorry about that.
Got it. No biggie, man. No biggie. Yeah, I'm not doing this on live, so no big deal. So you were talking about the scout swimmers and their role. So I know, like on the last podcast, we kind of talked about they kind of come in and do the hydrography. I think I'm saying that right.
And we didn't teach that.
Okay.
So but you're thinking of hydrographic survey.
Hydrographic survey, yeah.
Yeah. So the difference, between what guys at like BRC learn and what the scout swimmers learn, we learn basically the same stuff to do the surf reports, the different beach reports and all that, but we don't teach hydrographic surveys to the scout swimmers.
Okay.
So the difference is the scout swimmers are literally there ahead of the boat company. They ride into just outside of small arms range with the big raid force all on the boats. The two boats or one boat, depending on how the teams are set up, will leave that point, go into a closer point. The boats will kind of parallel to the beach. They'll enter the water and then start swimming in. But they're only, when they get to the surf zone, they're reconning for just like he was saying, any obstacles in the water, anything but what they're really doing is looking for the obstacles that are to puncture holes in the Zodiacs. Mm-hmm. So they're just going there to prep the landing of the Zodiacs from their company. So they might come in, they'll still spread out over a distance of maybe 100 meters, so they can get wide enough so they can get all the boats ashore, or at least get them ashore in waves, and then mark the beach, provide security on the beach while they signal, whether either by radio or by some kind of light or something, and then they'll mark left lateral, right lateral of what they recon or scouted out. So the boats, when they're coming in, like, hey, if we go outside of this, we might or might not hit something. But this is where they did their scouting or the reconning of the beach. And then in the center, there is like a light schematic of as you're kind of floating across. When you look in, you might see a light that's offset. And then as you come online, one's over top of the other. That's the angle you need to be in, so you're not tipping the boats in the surf zone. Because so if the boats or if the waves are coming in at an angle, you're not coming in straight at the beach, and then a wave hits and you tip the boat and everybody gets lost.
God, That would suck, man. I've never ridden in one. I've never been in that situation, but I've definitely seen a lot of surf passages, and it looks miserable. Especially for the guys that have, it's like their first time doing it, and you see them all get flung out of the boat. I'm like, man, that looks shitty. What do you think's the hardest? Okay, well, I guess we didn't talk about the Over the Horizon Navigator. What kind of training is that, and what do they do?
So they do the navigation from ship to shore to get them to where they need to go. I never went through that course, but just seeing them. But they're the ones that their primary mission is, like, think of the navigator of the patrol. They're to get you from ship to shore. So I mean, they're doing some slide math and some other stuff. So like, hey, we're doing 10 knots, and you got to go for 2 minutes, and I'll get us this distance. Then at that point, you got to click, and they have a compass in the lead boat or the boat that's leading the group. And then they, go off to this azimuth. Hey, we're coming up on this azimuth. They got to go, and the navigator's talking to the coxswain, and he's, moving the stick to get them on the angle that they need to. And he starts his clock again as they're going to the next, waypoint, if you will. And then if like one engine goes down, we're slowing down now. Now I got to do like, I did this plan back there on this paper. Now I got to do this on the fly. We're doing 5 knots instead of 10. How long is it going to take us to get here or whatever? To them, you can either do it over the horizon, or you can do it like he did. They launched in LCUs, landing craft units, got them in closer, and then dumped them out, and then they started coming in. When we were doing the that stuff, like I was talking about on the last podcast for Colonel Higgins, those guys were literally coming over the horizon. They didn't want to have any ships be seen of what's going on, so they practiced for coming literally over the horizon. And they weren't in Zodiacs; they were in Boston Whalers, but still.
That's got to be a weird feeling to do it for real. Like a real world mission. Like, holy shit, we're gonna hit a beach. That's got to be. I don't know. Out of those 3 courses, which one do you think is the most difficult to pass at the schoolhouse?
I would probably say the OTH course because it's math, math centric, and if you can't do the math in your head or think fast, hey, like they change it up. Like, hey, we're slowing down. We're at this speed now. Now you got to redo all your math in your head on the fly in a boat that's going up and down and cruising.
And possibly at nighttime.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely at nighttime. We did all our stuff at night.
Yeah, it makes sense, I guess. No reason to come over the horizon if you're doing it during the day.
Yeah.
So you had messaged me about doing one of those courses when Daniel Gordon had gone through with 8th Marine. So if you want to kind of go into that story a little bit.
Sure. So that was sometime in early to mid 2003, and again so we did the first week was the boat interop. So you have the Zodiac coxswains, the swimmers, and the OTH guys coming together, working out their kinks of how they communicate to each other. And the swimmers and the coxswains are a little easier. It's just getting the navigators into and the coxswains, whoever's going to be that, with the compass in the boat and working through those kinks. Like Wednesday and the Thursday, the whole company comes out, and then they do like broach boats. They paddle out through the surf with the paddles, engine appreciation, as we called it, where you didn't have an engine, you had to paddle out through the surf zone, and then flip the boats and then learn how to flip them back. So in case you actually flipped over for whatever reason, you knew how to broach the boats and get them back over, get them righted again, and then continue on. So at the end of that week, the company's, good to go with going out on the road, getting everything out as a company level with, 20 boats and all that, and working that math out and getting guys on the boats and they're comfortable on the boats. And if they fall in, they understand, we can swim and I'm not going to drown or whatever. And then the next week we start the actual raid courses. We teach, actions on the objective, security, assault, support classes to everybody. But over the weekend, they left all their boats out at BA 134. We're really at the case bands out there at the compound at Onslow Beach, where SOTG has, and they stacked all their boats up in like 1 or 2 case bands, and they left guys on fire watch. Come back in Monday, and 13 of the 20 boats had holes in them.
Jeez.
And I never found out if they ever figured out who did it or not. That was something for the company. They weren't our boats. During the Zodiac Hawks, of course, we have 5, and they use our boats. But at this point, this is the rifle company, or this is really the Muse boats. And whoever did this damage knew what they were doing, because they were puncturing holes by where the seams are. So you couldn't just throw like an easy patch over it. It took a little while for them to patch those things up.
So somebody was tired of eating the surf and decided they didn't want to get back in the boat, so punch some holes in them.
It was either that, or they were mad that it was Saturday afternoon on a nice day and they were watching the boats instead of being out on Libo.
Yeah, that could do it too. So how did that? Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it just, yeah.
So you told me, I want you to get into the story about how that affected you personally, and that the jump accident and stuff like that. So if you want to get into that and kind of tie those two together.
So on that same BLT 18, so that boat company was Bravo Company, Alpha Company was Amtrak. The way they broke it down was Alpha was Amtrak's, AA, Bravo was boats, and Charlie was choppers or helicopters. So Alpha Company was out there doing their Amtrak raids. So they came in Monday, and the way it goes is get classes on Monday. Tuesday, they have a day raid at 11, and then another raid later on that day at like actions on the objective were to commence right about sunset. So now they've done one all day. They can work out their kinks. Now they're doing another one where it's just starting to get dark. They can get up there, do actions, get up to the set while it's still light, and then start working through dusk. Wednesday is a night raid, and then Thursday is a certifying night raid. The graduation raid, if you will, at night at wherever we had set up for that raid. Well, those guys failed their night raid. They were kind of struggling all week, and they failed their raid Thursday night. We're like, man, what do we got to do? Well, as part of our setup at SOTG, we always got another objective for Friday night in case that unit failed the raid. So we wouldn't have to necessarily jump through hoops trying to get a site. We already had it. Usually we'd just turn it off. Like, okay, they passed the raid, turn that site off, and we're good. So they failed. I'm like, oh shoot, we need to remediate these guys. But me and another gunny at the time, we were scheduled to go do a jump with air delivery or LS or whatever. Yeah, I think it was air delivery. And so we manifested for it. We signed up for it. They packed chutes for us. And we're sitting there, we're like, do we go on this jump, or do we stay and get these guys ready for, to pass this raid? In the end, we're like, we're going to stay. This is our job. We can always do a jump later on. And at SOTG at the time, you have to get 4 jumps a year is what it is. Usually at jump units, you have to get 1 jump a quarter to stay your pay and your stuff, all your currency up to date. But since SOTG didn't have any jump gear, there was a waiver in there for us to do 4 jumps a year. So you could literally go out and, one day I did 3 jumps. We did elevator ops, got in a helo, went up, jumped, landed, took those off, put new ones on, and it was just a rotation. So we're like, all right, well, we can always do another jump. Let's stay and help these guys out. Middle of the afternoon, I get a call and I pick up the phone. I'm like, SOTG, Gunny Carr. They're like, Mike, are you all right? I looked down at my feet and I'm like, I'm good. What about Bill? The other gunny, I looked on the other side and I was like, yep, he's good too. Why? I was like, oh shoot, man, 4 jumpers out and no chutes opened. And I was like, whoa.
That's crazy, man.
It is.
4 parachutes failed, or was there obviously there's probably an investigation for that and everything like that. Did the 4 guys that their chutes didn't open, did the reserves open?
They did. So when they say they didn't open, they didn't blossom. It was one side of the rises were cut, and the thing was just a streamer out. So they went out and they looked up and they just saw it flapping. They pulled the reserves. Nobody got seriously hurt. I think there was some, maybe a broken bone or some bad bruising. But when they, the guy on the ground, I got 4 out. Oh shit, I got none open. And then they pushed the 46 or whatever it was out over the water because it's down at DZ Falcon. And they pushed those guys out over the water to just sit and do circles. So those guys landed. They all pulled the reserves. They got people out there to get them out. By the time that helicopter landed, they had NCIS out there. And in the end, it turned out it was one of the parachute riggers who had just had NJP or something. And he was pissed at his CO. And he's like, I'm going to get that guy. And 13 of the 20 chutes that were out there had one side of the risers cut.
That is crazy, dude. Like, how is... I mean, in someone's mind, like, how can you even justify that? Like, what did those 13 people that would have been wearing those chutes do to affect you? I mean, the CO wasn't jumping, or maybe he was, but damn, man. Like,
I'm with you.
Do you know what happened with that case? I'm assuming the dude went to prison and stuff.
He went to Leavenworth for 13 counts of attempted manslaughter.
Okay.
And I don't remember how long he had, but at that same time, me and the other gunny, Bill, were like, you know what? We're going to the grunts next. We're not going to anywhere else that's jumping. We're done jumping. Especially when we didn't have our own gear, so we're at the whim of somebody else.
Yeah. I was gonna ask, like, what's that like for that? I'm not jump qualified or anything like that, so that's got to be something that jumpers like kind of joke around about, before until something like that occurs, and then it's no longer funny. Is that the case?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, especially like me, I was, as they call it, dope in the rope. I was just a static line guy. I never got to go to free fall. I did some civilian free fall stuff, but never through the military. But, called a dope in the rope, and you're just at the whim of those guys. Whereas I think some of the more joking was the free fall guys, because they packed their own parachutes. You're like, hey, man, that doesn't look good, man. Did you pack this yourself? Oh, man. I think that's where more of that kind of joking goes. Whereas us, we're like, don't say that, because you just never know.
Man, that's so crazy that one person could have. I mean, that's a huge deal. That's so. I just don't get like how somebody could be like that. Good thing they caught him, I guess, and he went to prison. Oh, yeah. But man, has that happened before that you know about? Is this something that has occurred before, like a rigger sabotaging chutes? Not
that I know, but I don't. I wasn't deep into that community and all that stuff.
What was it like after did you jump anymore after that jump?
No.
Or, so you never jumped again, huh?
No, not for the military. Because shortly thereafter I went to 2-6. And then, like I said, me and the other guy, Bill, were, and he ended up, I went there for an Okinawa deployment. We came back, and then he checked in, and we went to Fallujah. So, we both went back to the grunts and never went to a jump billet again.
Yeah, okay. Now, so since you left there and you went to you said 2-6 and then Fallujah.
Yeah.
We didn't get into that last time, did we?
We did. We didn't even get into me being in Somalia with Fast Company.
Oh shoot! I thought you know what? I'm thinking of David Armstrong and him being in. Yeah. I did a podcast with him being in Somalia. Let's talk about that then. So, what year did you go to Somalia? You were there with FAST, which is Fleet Anti-Terrorism
Security Team Company.
Security Team. Yeah, I always fuck it up. So I guess first off, you want to kind of explain what Fast Company does, like what's their role within the Marine Corps and the military hierarchy, and then kind of explain how you guys got orders to go to Somalia.
So Fast Company, again, is the Fleet Anti-Terrorism Security Team Company. And my dumbed down version, I'm sure people will be like, what? Is fly-away night security guards, with all kinds of high-speed training, So counterterrorism is the offensive action going against terrorists. Anti-terrorism is, like a defensive action. So if, like for Somalia, the embassy was being threatened, and that was more than what the MSG, Marines were trained for. So they flew Fast Company in there to do that. So now if I'm going in, if you're a terrorist and you say, I'm going to hit that building, and then you see a bunch of dudes dressed differently with all kinds of more guns, oh shit, that's a hardened target. I'm gonna skip that one. I'm gonna go somewhere else. So that was kind of we're the deterrent for an action to go against.
Yeah, and I know FAST has been activated a few times for some embassy evacuations and stuff like that, and that's like their kind of their main role, right?
Yeah, they're there for that. They where else? So when the embassies blew up in Nairobi and Tanzania, I think it was, they sent fast platoons in to secure those facilities. They also do which I ended up doing 2 missions of, which is a refuel defuel. So they go in there and you guard the pier where a nuclear facility or a nuclear either submarine or a ship is getting nuclear rods taken out and new nuclear rods put in.
Okay.
guard those so nobody would come and try to get that special nuclear material. And then at a certain point, once it's out and in these certain containers, then it's over to the Department of Energy as they transport it off from there.
Yeah, I know they have special teams that go through and do those transports and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it's weird too. I guess a lot of people don't realize that they transport them in just basically plain looking semis with like SUVs following. Basically, you know, it's like it's very low key.
One of the guys I was at SOTG with ended up getting out, and then he's a supervisor.
Jumping on one of those teams.
Yep. And
that's cool.
And worked his way up to be a supervisor now. So that was pretty cool.
Did you ever experience any kind of like real world threats when you were doing that? Doing a refuel of a nuclear powered
So
boat?
we did the two that I did. I got sent to a rough facility, Pearl Harbor, Hawaii.
Oh yeah.
So and it was great. And the first time I got sent out there, it was myself and 18 or 17 others. So it was an 18-man section that flew out because at that point they were shutting down Pearl Harbor's security force company. So they still had their primary mission, and then RFDF was a secondary mission. So they were able to do their primary mission and almost all of the RFDF mission with our augmentation. So the first time I went out, we integrated with them and we did our stuff. Got trained up, got certified to guard that, and passed all their tests out there. And then we guarded it. The second time I went out, at that point, the company was almost closed and they couldn't do it at all. So my whole platoon went out there and did the security. But we never really had any big time threats. A couple of times we had some boats coming into kind of close. We did send a react for the guys that were on post, but nothing that. And then I think a low flying plane, but that was more of that guy was lost and kind of came over our area looking for the USS Arizona.
Yeah. Man, that's it's an interesting job, and there's like mixed reviews if you talk to infantrymen about fast company Marines and stuff like that, and it seems like it's a better place to go once you've already done some time in the fleet, and then you go there rather than go there first and then come to the fleet afterwards, because a lot of those guys show up as NCOs. And from what I've seen working with the infantry guys, the guys that go to fast company first and then come to the fleet, they catch a lot of flack and stuff like that because the training, is definitely good training and there's a lot of shooting and stuff, but it's not the same kind of training that your fleet infantry, unit is going through. You're not, you clear houses differently, you secure objectives differently because the mission's different. It's not the same kind of mission. And that kind of, do you think that hurts the guys that come from fast to come back to the fleet? Do you think that kind of puts them at a disadvantage, especially if they're like a new NCO or something like that?
I think it depends on the individual. I have a lot of guys that I talk to that hit the fleet running, and even some guys that were mediocre, we'll say at Fast Company, got to the fleet and they're like, oh man, I only got when they left Fast, like, oh, this is BS. I only got 3 ribbons. Yeah, you got a combat action, a sea service deployment, and then the Armed Forces Expeditionary. Those are some pretty badass things. Leaving Fast and going to the fleet. But when they got to the fleet, they're like, "Oh my gosh, teach us something!" And then they're like, "Oh shoot!" They were at a level above, within their fire team and teaching stuff to those guys. But I think it also, like I said, it depends on the mindset of that individual. Some guys can go in there cocky, and other ones like, "Hey, I know I haven't done this, but I can bring this to the table so that they can." And a lot of like that one guy I had that hour and a half conversation with. He did great, hit the fleet, and was kept on running. So but also one of the things, I don't know if they still do it, we did once a year or once every 6 months, or so I guess twice a year, we would go to Fort A.P. Hill or Fort Pickett and do traditional rifle company starting or rifle platoon stuff, attacks in the woods. Just so, hey, you're an 03, we don't want you to forget what you're going to be doing when you get to the fleet, intermixed
like
with all the other stuff.
Yeah, kind of like the silent drill team guys are all infantry guys, but they still take them out occasionally to do infantry training so that they don't completely atrophy all the stuff that they had learned already. Yeah. So how did you guys, as Fast Company, how did you end up in Somalia? Like, what was the deal with that?
So I want to say it was 92. So Fast Company has 6, or the ones I was in had 6 platoons, and then they end up rotating through every 4 months, starting in like sometime in 92. unrest was happening, I guess, in '92, and either the embassy or somebody else asked for their support. And this ties into me and my physical fitness. It just another reinforcing factor. They told them, like, hey, you're going to guard one facility. So like, okay, one facility, and they did the math. We're going to send 16 guys. They sent 16 guys over there, and they're like, where's the rest of your platoon? Where's the rest of your force? We have like 4 facilities for you to guard. They're like, oh, shoot. So they got an emergency call back to the States, like, hey, you need to launch the rest of the platoon now. And then those guys stood post for like 30 hours straight until the rest of the platoon showed up. And then from then it just dwindled down to guarding the embassy and the White House, what we call the White House compound, which is where the White House was the old ambassador's home that we took over. And then they built up revetments, or think of like
building posts and stuff.
Well, no, not what the heck are those things? Fill them up with dirt.
The Hescos?
The Hescos. There you go. That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
So it's think of something like that, but with metal, and then they put them behind those in trailers. So we stayed in the White House compound, or in the house itself. And that's where our COC was and all that. But it ended up collapsing in there. Then like I said, every 4 months they rotated a platoon. So 5th, 6th, 1st, and then I was 2nd. We were the last ones there, and they were going to, 3rd was getting ready to come over and relieve us.
Was there anything going on while you were there?
So when I got there, it was after Black Hawk Down and all that. So I got there June, and we pulled out in September of '94. We did guarding at the embassy. We also did armed convoy escorts for any of the embassy personnel going out in town for any kind of meetings or whatever. So we did 2 days on guard, 2 days on react or convoy or whatever.
Yeah.
And then depending on where you were when the missions came down, it was okay. If you were on react and it was something out in town, you were doing the convoys or whatever. If you were on guard, then you were staying. Didn't quite matter how your section was broken down.
So for in these situations, MSG, let's say you're going to an embassy, MSG's holding the embassy. They're the embassy security guards. And you guys get called in to reinforce. Let's be honest. There's embassies, U.S. embassies all around the world, and it's not an uncommon thing to have like protesting and stuff in front of the U.S. embassy, depending on what's going on in the world at the time. If you get called in because there's an actual fear of like of some kind of confrontation and stuff like that, like what kind of ROEs are you guys given? You're obviously not gonna. I can't imagine they're saying like, hey, you can shoot protesters and stuff like that. But like, it seems like a lot of the times we say we're gonna be like extremely tough, and we're gonna if someone tries to break through the gate, we're gonna kill them, or we're gonna deter that threat or whatever. But then you hear about stuff. What was the country? It was a couple years ago. It was while I was on the MEU. There was a group of Marines. I think it was a company of Marines got sent in. And they ended up leaving the country, and they made them leave their weapons in the country. I don't know if you remember this or not. It was like 2014. All the Marines, and I was on the MEU at the time. We were all like, what? They made them leave their weapons. They were going to give them over to the people that were running the country at the time. And I think the leadership in the platoon level, company level there was like, hey, destroy the bolts, destroy the weapons. Like we're still going to leave them, like we're being told we have to do, but we're going to destroy them first. So what I'm saying is I feel like we say one thing, like we're going to be extremely tough and we're going to, not allow our embassy to be attacked, or we're not going to allow this to happen. But then on the flip side, we don't necessarily always follow through with that. So I guess can you kind of explain like the ROE decisions, the decision-making process to get to a certain ROE and stuff like that, and like what kind of stuff you may have been involved with or seen while you were with FAST?
So when I got there, it was all the way to the one end. When they first got there, it was if you had a weapon, you were getting shot. If you were in range and you had a weapon, because it was just a lot of unrest. There were different clans fighting over the city. So, you have one clan fighting the other right out in front of you, and all that different gunfire. Sometimes they turn on you guys, on the U.S. forces or whatever. So, again, like when talking to the snipers from some of the first platoons that went over there, like, oh, yeah, man, we were whacking people day and night. It was great,
Really?
And then it got to, for our ROE, it got to you had to have a weapon and violence of action. So even though you had a weapon, I couldn't engage you, and you could like be patrolling with the muzzle towards us, at the towards like if our wall's over here on my left, and that muzzle's over there, I couldn't do anything. But as soon as you started bringing it up to shoot at me, that was the violence of action that I was able to now engage you.
Yeah.
Which was
okay. That's the kind of how it kind of morphed into Afghanistan and stuff like that. And I think that's how it is a lot of times. It's a very loose ROE at first until you get the situation under control. Then it's like, all right, let's tighten this up and keep it clean. So I pulled up this article. It says U.S. Marines handed over their guns before leaving Yemen. U.S. Marines, and this is from Reuters in 2015 is when this was written. U.S. Marines handed over their remaining weapons to Yemenis at the airport in the capital of Sana'a on Wednesday before boarding commercial aircraft to leave the country following the closure of the U.S. Embassy, the Pentagon said. And then it said the Pentagon said the Marines destroyed heavy weapons in their embassy arsenal, including machine guns, before leaving for the airport, but remained armed with smaller weapons until the end to ensure a safe exit from the country. Yeah, man. When that came out, I was like, what? Like they're letting the Marines, like they're literally turning their weapons over to this Yemeni people. Like, yeah, I'm surprised maybe a lot of people didn't hear about that.
Yeah, I mean, I did, and that was, maybe I was just too focused on my retirement and just getting settled into that. But I retired in 2015. But yeah, but again, that's also when you start dealing with the embassy and the ambassador. That's the State Department wants nothing to do, with the military and military action. They want to, work through political process to do whatever they're doing there. So they have a completely different view than military does.
Yeah, that's blasphemy, though, to have your Marines turn over their weapons. That's crazy.
I'm with you.
Yeah. I mean, did you ever see anything like that when you were, like, involved with FAST or anything?
Oh, yes. So there was a police training team that came in that was rotating guys in and out, and they had a footlocker full of, it was 50 Colt 1911 45s still in the Cosmoline. We're like, yes, commemorative Somalia 45s. That's chewing out in the ocean.
Oh, really?
So when we pulled out the embassy, all our ammo, we had a Huey that was assigned to the embassy. We kept on loading that thing up, flying it out, dumping everything out into the ocean, come back. Not necessarily weapons, but all the ammo, grenades, and other stuff. And
all the stuff you wouldn't be able to all hand carry out.
Yes.
Man, that's crazy. Yeah, I guess it happens, though.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else you want to talk about on Somalia before we move on to the did next?
So, shortly after I got there, so it was still during the turnover. Me and the sniper from the platoon before us went up to the roof, and he was kind of showing me his range card, which is a graphic depiction of what's out in front of your position with different spots marked for different ranges, and different sectors. You can say, hey, Sector 1 Alpha, and if you were the one that built it or you studied the range card, you know exactly what he's talking about. Then you can go down to 1 Alpha and know that's 625 yards with data to put on the gun, and then you can engage. It helps make things quicker. When you're engaging. So as he's up there showing me, we're talking, and outside of our walls there was 2 clans fighting back and forth. And so there's all kinds of gunfire going back and forth in front of us, and we're talking. He's pointing different things out. Then I hear a snap. I looked over at him. He looked over at me, and I was like, "Are they shooting at us, or is that spillover fire?" He's like, "I don't know." So we sit there and keep on talking. And then we hear crack. We hear a closer one. We're like, "That's getting a little closer." He's like, "Yeah, that's getting a little closer." So now we're like, "Forget the range card. Let's see who's shooting at us."
Yeah.
And now I'm looking through binos. He's looking through his M40, and we're searching. And I think maybe one more came, and we're like, oh, shoot, he's getting close. So we're down, and it's helmet, binos, leaning on the sandbag is for me, and he's leaning on his rifle on the sandbag. And then the last round came right between us. I dove right, and he dove left. And ever since then, I've had issues with my ear. But we're sitting.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we're sitting behind the sandbags. We're like, holy shit, that dude's got a bead on us. Got on the field phone and cranked it up. I was like, COC, this is, post 2 or whatever they called it. And they're like, send it. I'm like, yeah, we're getting shot at. No, that's just spillover fire. You don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, F you. Hung up, and I told him what he said. He's like, yeah, those dudes are lost. They're shooting at us.
Yeah. Don't you hate that when you send a report like that to hire and they question what you're saying? Like, bro, I'm here. Like, I realize what's happening. Like, I'm the one being shot at.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't necessarily hire. It was Lance Corporal, whoever it was down in the CMC. Yeah. But I get your sentiment. I've definitely had that where, the question
I had in 2013 on my advisor team, we were watching this area in Sangin that we called the Broccoli Head. It was right across the river from this little village. It was like in the northern part of the green zone. And there was just this clump of trees right across from a village. And we would watch them take a boat across the river and then store shit in that tree line in this big clump of trees.
Yeah.
And we kept telling them, we're like, hey, dude, they're storing weapons there. There's all this, it's only military age males going into this clump of trees. And we're watching them carry it looks like foot lockers into this thing, and there's no reason for that.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't let us shoot on them. They wouldn't let us fire anything because we hadn't actually seen a weapon get pulled out.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, whatever, man. And then one time, our Afghans, we saw these dudes going into the trees. The American force, like the 3-4 was the battalion that was there when I was on my advisor team. They wouldn't let us drop on anything. They wouldn't let us shoot or anything, even though we knew that these dudes were nefarious. So we had our Afghans shoot mortars, right? And the mortars were impacting the tree line, and the dudes were still running into the tree line to get shit. So we're like, dude, these are obviously not good people.
Yeah.
No good person's running towards the explosion to save stuff. It's just not going to be right. But anyway, one day I was up there on the post. I was at PB Shamshire in Sangin, and I was watching through a Leupold spotting scope. And I saw one of these dudes walk out of the trees carrying a weapon to his side, and I'm like 2 clicks away or something like that. I don't remember how far exactly it was, but it was like, I could tell it was a weapon, but I couldn't be like specific about what it was. But you could just tell by how he's carrying it and stuff. I radio it back to the COC, and I'm like, hey, and I've got a logbook, and I've been doing rotations with some of my guys watching this area the entire time. Because that's what we're trying to do is identify these dudes, like confirm their enemy so we can take this area out. And I'm telling you, logbook with military age male, brown man dress, walks into the tree line at this time. What you're going to be doing as you're watching shit. And I call it in like, hey, I got a dude, got a weapon. I see him. There's 3 guys in the tree line, blah, 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 blah. And then they start asking me different questions. And I'm like, what are you using? What kind of observation tools are you using? And I'm like, okay, I got a LRTV, which is a long-range thermal viewer. And I have a Leupold spotting scope. And I guess 3-4's sniper, platoon sergeant, or one of the snipers was like, there's no way he could identify a weapon from that far out. He's not telling the truth or something. I'm like, how is this dude that's not even here questioning me and they're listening to him? So instead, these dudes are running around with weapons. That was just another thing that put a bad taste in my mouth about 3-4 during that deployment. And then so we just looked over to our Afghans like, hey, man, let's shoot some mortars. Let's shoot some 82 millimeter mortars or 81 millimeter mortars, whatever it was, 82. Yeah, man, it's tough. It's tough. That kind of, yeah. Anyways, so did you guys ever get to engage back at whoever was shooting at you?
No, we never found who it was, and then we never took any more fire after we kind of ducked down and kind of went back up. There was some weird stuff that with those guys when I first got there or during the workups, I kept on calling like, hey. I can get these dovetail mounts that'll go on top of the top ring in the front of the M40 so we can mount a night scope on it. The KN-203 Simrad or whatever it was. And so you look through this thing and it hooks to your scope. So you look through all that and you can see and shoot at night. It's just you have to have like a 2-inch offset from where your point of aim is because of the way the mirrors go with the scope. And I was like, hey, I can get another one. If you only have them for the M14, the DMRs, I can get one for the M40 if you don't have it. Yeah, we have it. And I get there and they don't. And I was like, you guys are killing me. Now we're limited to shooting the DMR at night only and not the M40. And so that was
how far is that? At the time, I don't know if they still use that. They probably have something similar to that. It's probably better now. Yeah. But at the time, what kind of range could you get out of that at night?
The sight?
Yeah, with the night vision on it?
Couple 100 meters or more at least. But with the M14, it had a smaller powered scope, so it wasn't magnified as much, and so that limited our our range. We ended up doing come-arounds with the spot and scope like you were talking about and night vision goggles, clicking up to that thing and looking through and seeing. I think we were able to see out to 600 meters with a fairly well lit night, and be able to identify weapons and other stuff.
Nice. Okay. So after you left Somalia, what happened then? What unit did you go to after that? Is that when you went to SOTG?
No,
that was like 10 years before, huh?
That was a few years before. So I went from there to 3-6, and at 3-6 I went to the sniper platoon.
Okay.
And that's when we did the RNS and all that stuff for the MU.
Okay. So for the sniper platoon, for a lot of people out there, obviously Marine sniper is a like one of those mythical jobs, and like a lot of high school kids before they join the Marine Corps is like, I'm going to be a Marine sniper. I was one of them. And only few people, actually get to do it, obviously.
Yeah.
So what was it like to work on a team like that? And can you kind of talk about some of the attributes that somebody needs to have to be successful on a sniper team?
Sure. In my mind, you need to have a mix between an A-type personality, but also have some patience, if that kind of makes sense. Definitely the patience, physically fit, mentally strong, because you're out there sometimes cold, wet, looking at nothing until something pops up and you're going to be ready to go into action. Math is, and I don't know about the stuff they have now. I know the SEALs and some other special operations guys have things you can plug into the scope, and it tells you, it adjusts the crosshairs for the barometer, and the humidity and all the different stuff and the wind, and it lasers out to the target and it'll adjust it all for those things. So it's, pretty dummy proof at that point. But when I was going through, we were field sketching when I went through school. Now they got cameras, so a lot of stuff's progressed. So some of it is also being able to understand technology, I would say. And then just, good skill to shoot. So that's part of it. But the other half of, the sniping is the stalking and understanding that. And years later, I was at AITB, Advanced Infantry Training Battalion, and I was the gunner there, and we had sniper school under us there, and it was, when you have a program of instruction, it's kind of hard to just like, hey, come in here and infuse and change and whatever. And it had gone from, when I went through school, you had to be within 200 meters of the observer before you could take a shot. And they're like,
okay.
Yeah. And it wasn't necessarily because you're going to take a shot at 200. It was because if you can get in that close to a trained observer, and then also it becomes on the maturity of the instructor. Hey, this guy's within 200. I can kind of see him because he's 200 meters away, and I got like a 20 power scope looking at him, or I got the binos, but he's doing everything right. So if he took a shot at me at 800, I have no idea where he's shooting at. So it was, a little bit of the maturity of the instructors to go in there and not be like, well, I had it tough, so I'm going to make it even harder for you, kind of stuff.
That's what happens in a lot of those courses, right?
Yeah. And then you're at school, so you're still learning. So when those guys are, I was like, hey, how come we don't drop them off where the truck is, let them walk out like we did out to the 1,000-yard or further, where they were like, okay, you have 10 minutes to veg you up. Now you start working your way back to where the trucks were. Well, they're going to be able to, find them on without knowing where they're at. And I was like, yeah, but they're still students. Let them learn. So as I'm like, for me, as I was walking out, I could turn around and say, okay, yep, there's a truck. And I could get behind different vegetation and see, how from this side, I saw how it looked coming in, what the instructor going to look at, but how's it look for me, so I know to identify, okay, that's a good bush to hide, to use as cover to get to my position, or this is a good firing position. It's all learning, whereas those guys at that point, it was drop them off at 1,100 or 1,200 meters, whatever it was. Hey, the truck's that way somewhere. Time starts now. Go. You have 4 hours. Which is a little harder, but again, the point I'm getting across was the instruction and understanding as a student. You want the guys to pass. You want these guys to be able to go back to the platoon and not have a sniper platoon that has 2 school trained guys as they go out on a deployment.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, because you have to like temper your expectations. You know, they're not going to roll in. They don't have that, time and service knowledge that you have from being a sniper for a year or 2 years or however long it is before you become an instructor. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you got to help the guys kind of fall down and then pick them up a little bit and explain what they did wrong. It's kind of the same thing in the JTAC world at first, when they're going through primers and stuff. It's like, hey man, you're just here to fuck shit up and learn before we send you to the actual school, and then when you get there, we hope you don't do any of this wrong. But, but you got to understand their capabilities first. It seems like the sniper program has kind of morphed a lot over the last, 1 or 2 decades. Because before there was no MOS, right? It was just a B billet, or not a B billet, but it was just a secondary job.
Secondary MOS.
Secondary MOS. Now it's a primary MOS, correct? Is it 0317 or?
0317, yes.
How did that change, like the sniper community, just giving that primary MOS?
It started with, let me back up a little bit. It went from 8541 when I went to school, and then it went to 0317 because in McTims or McTiffs or something, you couldn't track how many 8541s you had in your unit. Whereas if it was an 03, any 03 number, they could type that in there and they could figure out, okay, we have 25 0369 infantry unit leaders, or probably a way low number, but you get the idea. So there was the other guys like, hey, we need snipers coming into, we want to pull from 1-2 to come to 2-8 to come to our platoon and do this. Well, you have other dudes that are there that are school trained, but headquarters of Marine Corps or even the unit doesn't know because they can't type that in there and find that secondary. So that's how
they're not populating.
So that's how it got to 0317. So now the monitors and everybody else can say, eat a bag of what, because you have 5 school trained guys. One's in Fox Company, one's in Echo Company, and they can dime out. Well, if you want them, pull them out and put them in your sniper platoon. They're already school trained.
That's crazy that a school-trained sniper would get lost in the sauce like that, where they come back to a unit or they go to a unit and then they don't even realize they're a sniper and they're just floating around as your, average infantryman. Like that's that's kind of what a waste of a resource, obviously. That's obviously not a good thing because, one, there's only limited seats for sniper school. 2, not many people pass that course. That's a very, from everyone I've talked to, that's an extremely difficult course to get to even pass. So, the attrition rate is extremely high. So to have your guys come back and then kind of throw them to the wayside like that is crazy. It's honestly, when I was in, I say we, like I'm still there. Yeah. When I was in, we were having an issue with that where we would send guys to TACP school and they'd come back and it's not a primary MOS either. It's a billet. And then they would turn around and go, hey, Staff Sergeant so-and-so, you're going to recruiting duty. Or hey, Sergeant so-and-so, you've been histed. And there was nothing they could do about it. It's like, dude, you just spent $1 million teaching this guy how to drop bombs, and now you're sending him away to go do something that's not even remotely, it doesn't even involve that. Yeah. And then I don't think it's the same with snipers. Whereas once you go through sniper school, you're always a sniper, right? There's no like annual training or anything like that to maintain anything. Yeah, where JTACs, you have to, you have to get drops and you have to do certain stuff every year because if you don't, you lose your certification. So it's even stupider because now you've sent this guy, you've trained this guy, spent maybe $1 million, hundreds of thousands of dollars, if anything, because you got jets flying around and helicopters flying around to train him, and then you throw him out to go be a recruiter, and then by the time he gets done with his recruiting duty, he comes back and he's not even qualified anymore. He'd have to go back through the school again. So. Yeah, I don't know. It's probably the same way with a bunch of MOSs. I think we all have our own issues within our worlds like that. Yeah. So how did that? So once they changed that and they made it easier to find these guys, did they suddenly realize holy shit, we have a ton of snipers in the Marine Corps, or was it not?
I don't think it was that. I don't think it was that dramatic, but it allowed certain units to say, okay, and easier for guys, even the sergeant majors or whatever, to go in there and say, even the sniper platoon started to say, hey, can you search our battalion, go to S1, and can you search our battalion for 0317s? Before I start asking for somewhere out of it, let me see if there's anybody in here. Then they can say, okay, Smith, is he a good guy or a bad guy? Do I want him, or is he, kind of a turd? Maybe he's in the rifle company because he had a bad taste from his last sniper platoon. And I think it was more of staff sergeants coming back hey, we need a good platoon sergeant. Well, you got a platoon sergeant, and he's a school trained guy. Why don't you put him in there instead of this dude just coming off the drill field who's just an 0369?
Yeah, just an 0369.
Well, I mean, I don't mean to say it in a
I know what you're
thing,
saying.
but if you got a guy that's been to school, has done the billet, and then you have a guy that hasn't, then.
Yeah. Plus, guys that coming off the drill field, it's hit and miss. Nothing against them. It's not their fault. They've been gone out of the MOS for 3 years. They've been, instead of learning squad tactics or company tactics, they're out there learning how to march dudes in unison so they can get a high drill card, or a high score on their drill, whatever. So yeah, definitely not their fault on that. But yeah, it's funny.
When I left fast, it was funny. They're like, "Oh man, our platoon sergeant's a sniper at the platoon I was going to, but he's bringing one of his buddies up from the drill field. Oh my gosh, this is going to be horrible." And I was at the so Allen is over by Naval NOB Norfolk, and Camp Allen was where our base was, and Camp Elmore was a smaller little base that was all over there, and they had a PX. Mm-hmm. So I was going through the PX one day, shortly before I was getting ready to PCS down to Lejeune. And I saw one of the guys I was in 2-8 sniper platoon with. And I was like, "Hey, dude, what's going on?" We talked for a minute, and he's like, "Where are you going?" I was like, "I'm going to 3-6." He's like, "No, I'm going to the sniper platoon." He's like, "No shit, I'm going there too." I was like, "Do you know this guy Pavone?" And he's like, "I do. He's the one that's getting me into the sniper platoon." I was like, "Sweet." So I sent some guys down there like, "Hey, man, it's going to be all good because the dude coming in is a sniper, and I was a sniper with him in my first sniper unit." So it all worked out well.
Cool. Can you kind of go through the roles of a sniper team? Like, so as a comparison, in the artillery side, we have your fire support teams, right? Which has a artillery officer, a forward observer, or excuse me, a scout, an 0861 fire support man, or I guess fire support marine now is what they're saying because there's females in the MOS. So you have a officer, you have the scout, and then you have like your radio operator, and then it breaks down all these different people within the fire support team. In reality, most of the time, they pull like one of those dudes out and they actually only use like one of them. But that's how the team is broke down. Can you kind of explain how the doctrinal way a sniper team is formed? Like, what are the different roles within that team? And then maybe talk about how they're actually used depending on the scenario.
So at school, you go through and you do a two-man team, sniper and the assistant sniper or whatever, or really a spotter is what it's called. That's just the nucleus of the team. When you get to the fleet, then you have a scout, and then you have an RTO along with the sniper and the spotter. And so you form a nucleus of a 4-man team, and that's what it is by TO. Go ahead.
Are these all normally, is the scout a sniper normally as well, or is that a different MOS that's coming in to fulfill that role?
That's an 03XX. The only billeted snipers were the sniper, the team leader and the assistant team leader, or were the two that are 80 school trained 8541 or 0317. Then the other two are 03XX.
Okay.
When we went and did the MU with 3-6, when that guy Cooper came in, we ended up having 16 school trained guys in our platoon. So we were a pretty stacked platoon, and B, a pretty senior platoon. We ended up having 4 staff sergeants in our platoon by the time we got back because we were so senior. So me and Cooper picked up staff sergeant, and another guy named Dool picked up staff sergeant as well. So we had 3 team leaders of the 5 in our platoon were staff sergeants, plus the platoon sergeant. Like some of the teams had all 4 guys were school trained snipers, and then like my team, I had 3 of the 4 of us were school trained snipers. And that's
awesome.
And it worked out well. I mean, my team was really gelled really well. The RNS course that we went through set us up for success, working on our SOPs, standard operating procedures, and just a flow of a lot of different stuff from before we leave, gear inspection. Okay, this is what we're going to this is what we're going on this mission with. I'd have them lay it out on a poncho, and hey, you got the radio, and I go through, check each guy off, turn the radio on, get a radio check with the guy over there. Yep, it's working. Okay, pack it up. We're not messing with it, and go through all the way through to actions in the hide site. Once we get in the hide site, hey, I kind of sat back, but like, okay, the ATL would go set the rifle up. The RTO would start getting the antenna set up. The other guy would start, security and do that. And I would kind of get out. I would set the rifle up, and then the other guy would start doing reports. We had to do a building report format and some other stuff when we were doing RNS for the direct action platoon guys. But it worked out in the SOP. So by the time we got going, I didn't even have to say anything. We just hit the hide site, and everybody started doing their stuff, and it worked out really well.
When you say you're setting up the gun, what do you mean by that?
Literally figuring out, like, so if we were in an urban environment, figuring out, hey, this is the building. Sometimes we had a whole side of a building, or it might be like, hey, you have this one room, and this one or two windows to observe out of one of the target that we're going after. And then it was a matter of, let's see what we have in here. Let me set up screens and some other stuff that we did to obscure ourselves within the hide site, without getting in detail of, letting everybody else know how we did that. But we'd set that up to obscure us within the hide, and then literally set the gun up and start observing on the target site and taking notes on what we see, if there's any activity, and then just our series of reports. Our first one was an emergency assault report. So in case before the direct action platoon was ready to do the hit, if something happened where they had to execute before they had their plan, this is the first report in, like, hey, if you hit our side, this is how we suggest you go. This is your last cover concealed. This is the door I'd suggest you hit. And then here's a slight description of what it is. Now they have cameras. You can just take a picture of it and send it back.
We had I was going to ask, that was my next question.
We had to do a detailed report of, like, okay, but that was a follow-on report. We would say, okay, last cover concealed is here. If you're going to hit our side, and it's, you're going to hit, Alpha 3 Delta. Alpha being the first floor, 3 being the third entry in on that side from the left, and it's a door, or Whiskey was a window, and it was just a quick down and dirty. So in case they had to do an assault, they haven't seen a site, they could have at least plan, okay, this, and if all 4 teams on all the sides sent this, the same reporting for they had a better idea of where we want to go from. Like, okay, we can get to the door closer on the east. We're going to do that. We're going to hit that side. Because we can get to the door quicker and closer, without exposing yourself as much. And then we did a building report format, which was just literally describing our side of the building, using codes, A through whatever number of floors, and then Alpha being, Whiskey being window, Delta being a door, and then we describe that door. We have a big sheet of different kinds of doors and windows. So we can say, Alpha 1 Whiskey, and we give them from the left edge. So if it's the edge of the building to the left edge of the window, it's this distance. And then we describe the window, dimensions and all that. And we say window is, X-ray. And then you got to look on that sheet for X-ray, and they can see what that window is. And then the distance from the next one, Alpha 2 Delta, is a door. So from the left edge, you give them the distance from the left edge of the window to the right edge of that door, so then they can map it out, and then you tell them what the door looks like. And then you do that all the way across to your whole side of all the floors. You send that back to the topo guys, the topographic specialists, and they were able to type that into a computer and print out what our side of the building looked like. So now the force guys could sit there and tape all 4 sides together and see what the building was that we were seeing.
That's interesting. That's crazy. Yeah. All that before, now we just shoot a photo, and then they have satellite internet. They just upload it real quick, send it over, secured comms. That's pretty cool. Yeah. Wow, man. How long do you think it would take you to do that? Like, let's say it's a 3-story building. How long do you think it takes you to describe and get all those details of one side of the building?
At first, it took forever. It was painful. But by the end, we got pretty good at it. It was really the hardest part was just estimating, the range. We'd have to try to figure out the range to the target. So then we could do the math of the mills. Okay, it takes taking up 1 mil in our site, and then doing the math to figure out the distance.
Got to do the worm. Got to do that worm formula.
Yeah.
Nice, man. Is there anything else you want to talk about, like sniper wise, that comes to mind that you think the audience should know about? Like I said before, as we started this kind of segment, that community has changed a lot over the last 15 years. With the implementation of like the MOS and stuff like that, and new gear. That I think recently, what was it, last year? Maybe they just came out with the M40 A5 or A6, like another upgrade to the sniper rifle.
Yeah.
What kind of upgrades? I mean, it's basically the same platform though, right? Which is some extra attachments and stuff like that.
To be honest, I don't know. I thought they were going to a bigger round, but I can't. I've kind of lost the bubble on all that stuff when I retired. And,
Yeah. I think they've been testing out a new round, and a new rifle, but they're constantly doing that.
Yeah.
What was your favorite? Did you like shooting the M40? Did you enjoy that, or did you like DM better?
No, I liked the M40. I was just once I learned it, I loved it. And people are like, so I'm not like the biggest gun guy, meaning I don't go out and research all kinds of different guns, but I knew the M40, and I was like, but that's not, you can't do sub-minute of angle adjustments on there. And I was like, you know what? It works for us. I've seen a dude climb out of the back of a 5-ton, drop his rifle, hit the crown, hit the scope. He picked it up and qualified out to 1,000. You might have some, you might have some other ones. So it was marine proof, and it was durable.
Yeah. It's got to be. Can't have anything that's too sensitive. You can't even bump it. Yeah. Because you're definitely going to bump it, especially when you guys are stalking and stuff like that, dragging it around.
I mean, especially when you get the urban environment.
Yeah. What kind of, do you want to talk through, I guess, what kind of shooting training do you do? Now, we all know that snipers can shoot out. What do you train to? 1,000? Do you train out to 1,000?
Qualify out to 1,000.
Is that the farthest you've ever shot, or have you gone beyond that?
I've shot like at the advanced sniper school, or Scout Sniper Advanced course, as they call it. I think it's the team leader course now, or whatever. Anyway, we shot out. The furthest I've shot, and my coolest shot, I guess, would be shooting down the barrel of a tank at 1,500 yards with the with the Sasser. So I mean, it's a 50 cal, so it's meant to go out, but the Sasser isn't a sniper rifle because it doesn't have the minute of angle accuracy that you would associate a sniper rifle.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are misinformed about that.
Yeah, and it was so up there. Those ones, every time you shoot, it goes back to the match armors to sit there with tweak. Vice the guy in the fleet who we shoot ours. It gets to the round count, and then you send it to the armors, the echelon maintenance, whatever it is, and then they work on it. Comes back. Vice is up there. Every time you shoot, they get worked on. So they were a little bit more accurate than the ones I had back in my unit in 3.6.
Man, 1,500 yards. That's crazy. Yeah. Where was that at? Where'd you shoot that at?
Quantico.
Okay.
One of the ranges. They had tanks out on there. We're going through a Sasser shoot, so we'd sit there and, this was back when the Sasser was kind of first coming, not necessarily first coming out, but they were doing a certification on the Sasser that you had to go through before you could shoot it and all. So I'd already gotten the certification, but we're going through like, okay, before it was an Ivor Johnson, the ones they had. So it was like, take the bolt all the way out, slide around on the bolt face, put it back in, lock it down, and then shoot and take the whole brunt of the 50 cal on your shoulder. You can only do a couple of those before your fingers start tingling and go numb. But with the Barrett, it has the muzzle. The buffer spring was like 36 inches, like a compressed down into a foot long area. So that helped. And then it also had a barrel. I don't remember the name of it, but like a barrel spring as well. So all these things helping reduce the recoil of it. So we could sit there and we'd shoot through 10 rounds, firing as quickly as we could, just to show that, okay, we can do this and it's not going to kill us. And if we need to do a rapid engagement, we can.
Yeah. Man, I miss having the military pay for me to go shooting. That's the, especially nowadays when ammo is more scarce and more expensive because of everything that's going on because of 2020.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Have you shot one since you gotten out? Have you gone back and shot a 50 at all?
No.
Have you had that opportunity? No.
So I haven't shot any kind of rifles except for my son's. He bought a 308 here in the last year or so, and I helped him zero that.
Nice.
And actually, last night I had a Masterpiece Arms rifle that finally shipped and showed up. So it's a 6.5 Creedmoor bolt action rifle.
Okay,
It's sweet.
cool.
So
Yeah, the only thing I have that's like long range, I guess, is a 270. I got two 270s that were I inherited after my uncle passed away. So I haven't really had time to take those out to the desert and kind of shoot them and stuff like that. I was never a long range person. You know, I'm an AR-15. My buddy had an AR-15 before I joined the Marines, and then shooting the M16 and M4 in the Marines. You know, that was kind of like my experience. It wasn't my full experience with weapons. I've shot. I'm from Indiana. You know, we shoot hunting rifles and shotguns and stuff like that. Nothing. Yeah. So I'm like you. Like I like shooting and stuff, but I'm not a gun guy where I can go and the twist rate on this barrel is exponentially better. You know, I'm not like that at all. I'm impressed by those people that can remember all that stuff. But that's just not me. Yeah. So how long were you involved with like the snipers? Because at some point, you get promoted, and then you obviously went the gunner route. Yeah. So were you involved with like sniper teams up until that point that you went and became a chief warrant officer, or what?
No. So I did, like I said, in 2.8 I did my 2 rifle company deployments, and then I went to the sniper platoon. So that was a 2-year time frame, or maybe a little bit more than 2 years. And then I went to Fast Company. At Fast Company, I was a squad leader, but sniping was a secondary kind of thing for me to do up there. Mm-hmm. So I did it, but not as dedicated as I was in the sniper platoon. Then when I left Fast, I did another 2 years in 3/6 sniper platoon where we did the deployment and all that. So that was my main bulk of it. Then when I left 3/6, I went to SOI, and then at SOTG, I was as part of RNS. I didn't necessarily teach urban sniper, but when we did the shooting portions as part of the Maritime Special Purpose Force by the team on the South, and they were going to take a shot, I was the PSO, position safety officer for that guy taking that shot. So, so I'd have to get behind his rifle, and initially I'd have to mail something out and then do the math in my head to make sure that his stuff's correct. And then during one of our Truexes, they're like, hey, we have all this extra money. We want you to go buy some stuff. So we end up getting some laser rangefinders to make it easier. We could just look out the window, bink. Okay, it's 286 yards. Yep. We wouldn't necessarily tell them, but if their math brought them close enough to that solution, then like, okay, Roger, you're good. You're good to take this shot. Yeah. And then
go ahead.
I would say once I left SOTG, I kind of was out of it in the operational sense. At 2/6, we were the anti-terrorist battalion for a portion of our time. So I helped train the DMs and all those guys for my company, as well as the battalion. My battalion commander he knew I was a sniper, and a lot of times he'd come in and ask me questions like, okay, they're asking about this at the med. What do you say about this? And I sometimes I go to meetings with them, and he'd be sitting in the front, and then I'd be in the back in the peanut gallery, and they say something, and he'd like, Gunny, is that right? I'd sit up, yes, sir. Sit back down.
That sounds good.
Who's this dude? And then, as well as when my company went to Afghanistan regarding the embassy, and there's some stuff with the snipers and the DMs up on the roof that I helped out with as well. Just stuff that you learn over that I picked up over the years. From like even teaching at SOTG, we used a GRG. Like the. Graphic representation of the ground, and it had like tick marks and other stuff across. So you can sit there and say, hey, go to Alpha 2. If we're all looking at the same picture, where Alpha 2 was, because there was an incident where those guys were up on the roof and they saw people with radios or cell phones and binos, but they're out in the middle of nowhere. And I was like, go describe where they're at. Well, it's in the middle of whatever. And I was sitting there like, hey, dumbass, why don't you use a GRG? And so I went to the intel guys like, hey, print me up a map or a satellite imagery of our area. And I took tick marks with a ruler across and then down, did the lines and photocopied that a couple times, gave it up to them, gave it out to the counter intel guys who were going out. So now we had a better idea of like, okay, where, go to this. And okay, well, shoot, it's out in the middle of nowhere, but I have a better idea of where out in the middle of nowhere was, where that grid was.
Yeah, for sure. Now, GRG. So for those that don't know what we're talking about, the GRG, think of like you're looking at a Google Earth image, and that image is portioned out into different sectors, and that sector is named like Alpha or Bravo or Charlie, and then within Alpha, all the buildings are numbered. So in the case like you're discussing, you can be like, hey, they're west of Alpha 15. Well, I just got to go to Alpha, then 15, and then with that map, I have a list of grids. So Alpha 15, here's a 8-digit or 10-digit grid of that location, so I can easily get on target and stuff like that. And GRGs are life in Afghanistan. You got to have a GRG.
And this one wasn't even that detailed. I just wanted to do, so I did A through whatever across the top, and then 1 through whatever across the bottom. So if it was this small box, it was 1-inch boxes. If it was the one box in the middle, I go Charlie 3.
Yeah.
And then because it was just on the fly at night as those guys were trying to go out and look for these guys using the cell phones. But then later,
go ahead.
I would say then later on, I had those same intel guys do a more professional grid system across, and then they laminated them and sent them out to all the different posts, so everybody was on the same sheet of music. And so I had left and went back with the company that was leaving to go back and take care of guys back in the rear while the rest of the company stayed. But the ambassador saw the GRGs like, man, this is an amazing idea. Can we?
Oh, yeah.
And they went to the RSO. Can we do this across the whole city? And then they end up doing that across the whole city. So then they can narrow down over, like if we're out on a convoy, whatever, and we get hit here and it's off the route that you were saying, hey, we're still in, Alpha 3, and they can have a better idea of where we're set up.
Yeah, quickly get on.
Yeah, without having a number or whatever, all the different buildings in the city of.
For sure. Yeah, we used that a lot when I was there in 13. And the cool thing was that was when the tablets first came out that had like the map data and stuff like that. They called it PFIV at the time. It's something different now. I know it's evolved. Before it was only like JTACs, basically JTACs, and I think the flight crews had them, and it was kind of like a up and coming kind of thing. So we kind of held it close to our chest because we didn't want other people to know about it because we were kind of figuring it out. Yeah. But it's become way more than that. But I know at the time, it got to the point on the map imagery is so good where you could just type in, instead of typing in a grid on my tablet now, I could put Alpha 15 and it would snap to that building and give me a 10-digit grid right there. Yeah. And one, it helped me on the ground, but as a JTAC and I'm talking to the aircraft, he's also flying with that. And I could be like, hey, I'm taking contact from Alpha 15, and he immediately knows where to put his pod at and stuff like that. So the what we call the kill chain was definitely decreased by that, that kind of technology and stuff.
We ended up having a detailed, when we went to Fallujah with 2-6 on that next deployment, we did that where we had all the buildings numbered, lettered and numbered and all that throughout the city.
Yeah. Another big thing with Fallujah was that was like when we first started. I read some kind of professional paper on it. Maybe if I'm wrong, someone correct me. But I want to say Fallujah is where keyhole cast was kind of invented, like that style of controlling aircraft, because the airspace above Fallujah was just way too crowded, and there was like obviously a lot going. And I'm not sure if you were in the first battle or the second battle.
No, we were there. We got there in late 05.
Okay. So later on. Yeah, so during the Battle of Fallujah, during the second battle, that's when keyhole cast kind of really came around, and it kind of grew from there. Back to being a sniper and stuff like that, though. How is it being now on the other side where you're an instructor and you're now evaluating, or not an instructor, but an evaluator, evaluating these guys? Like, how did that feel to be like, you're now like the expert, the PME expert?
Yeah. It was kind of cool. I enjoyed it. I like teaching, so I enjoyed that whole aspect of it. And even to the point of using, in my experience, like, hey, here's an example of this, that, or the other, that you might use this in the future. Even back to doing when I was at the raids course, teaching the raids, one of the classes I taught was actions on the objective. And I was sitting there and I was like, okay, so this was, 2000. The war hadn't, nothing, 9/11 hadn't happened. I was like, okay, who's ever been shot at? And raised their hand. A couple guys raised their hand, like me. Okay, so who's been to the rifle? Or what did I say? I was like, who's been at the rifle range? You're sitting here, you hear crack. Hey man, that was yours. Crack. Hey man, that was yours. Crack. Oh shit, that was mine. When you're sitting in the butts and you pull the butts down and you do that, and I was like, yep, it's the same thing when you're getting shot at. That's the same sound you hear, and you can tell how far off it is or how close it is, by how by the crack. Just like you did, it wasn't your target; it was the next target over by the sound of it. And then the light bulb clicked on forever. Like, oh shit, I understand now.
Yeah. And it gets an even stranger sound the closer it gets.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
the sound gets weirder and weirder.
Yep. And then I was like, so as it gets closer, I was like, and how does that help you on the objective? Well, when I'm down in my position, I'm getting ready to rush. If it's like real close, I can only rush like a foot and I got to get down. But if it's way off, I can rush, 5 or 6, steps and then get down, or I can make it to that next piece of terrain or whatever. But you can tell by the sound and how close it is, how precarious your position is, and whether you need to move now or can you move or whatever. But nobody had been shot at other than at the in the rifle range in the butts to understand that, and like, oh shoot, that makes all kinds of sense.
Yeah, that's one of those things you don't really. I don't know. You got to learn it. I mean, you just have to experience it to kind of understand it. Oh man, when it's super close, I've talked about it before, but I got pinned down on a rooftop one time, man, and the rounds were like inches from me, and I was just like, "This is fucking sketchy. Like, that is not a good feeling," and it makes a strange sound, when it's that close, and it's just oh.
When that round passed between us and Somalia, I could like feel it because we were like shoulder to shoulder. So I mean, we weren't like far off. We were like touching shoulder, and you could like feel it go by. Like, oh my god.
Yeah. I was laying on my back, and I had one sandbag next to my head. And I had rounds flying over my face, and I'm like, "Fuck, dude, I'm gonna get shot in the head right here." I was so scared; it was crazy. So you want to talk about now? I guess we will move forward into your deployment to Afghanistan or your deployment to Iraq with 2-6. Then,
yeah, we can. I mean, that was kind of short. I had already put my package in for a gunner. I think my battalion gunner knew I had gotten selected, but they couldn't let the cat out of the bag. So I was a company gunny at Fox Company, and I'd been there for 2.5 years. And he's like, "Sure," talking to the battalion commander, "what are we going to do if Gunny Carr gets selected? What are you going to do? You're going to pull him out of the company?" So after that prodding a little bit, they moved me to be the log chief.
Oh, okay.
So I ended up being the log chief for I think it was RCAX back then, and then our deployment to Fallujah. And halfway through, I got selected and pulled out and came back to do my TBS and all that stuff.
That's awesome, man. That's a huge deal for people outside the community who don't know that. But being a gunner in the Marine Corps, we talked about it, on the first podcast. It's one of those ranks you unless you're a battalion staff or something like that, you don't really see the gunner very often, or you do. You're like, who's that guy? What does he do? And it's just that's a big deal. I think that's a really cool job that you guys get, and it could be not a dangerous, but it could be a sketchy job because every range falls on your shoulder. So if anything ever happens on any range, that's all on the gunner, not all, but a lot of it falls on the gunner. So that's a lot of responsibility to take on. Have you seen a lot of gunners get in trouble for stuff that maybe they weren't even involved with that happened on a range?
Not
because officers get relieved all the time for stuff that they're not even involved with. It just happens like, hey, command culture.
Not a whole lot. Not when they're not necessarily involved. I've seen one get relieved, and I can't remember what happened to him after that. When that incident with, was it 19 or they're out of 29 Palms, and then they went up to Hawthorne to do a shoot. And the guys fired with the mortar, and then the mortar exploded coming out of the tube. There was the NBC officer was the RSO, and I think the gunner was the OIC. The NBC officer, though, was a previous 0341, so it wasn't like, hey, let's just pull this dude in here and go.
Yeah.
So they both kind of got in trouble with that.
I think that whole command ended up getting in trouple for that.
Because it was a whole philosophy of kind of pushing the envelope, and that
for those that go ahead.
Obviously, that mortar section hadn't from up my memory from the report, they hadn't fired mortars in like a year, and they're out there trying to do handheld direct alignment, if I remember correctly.
Oh, okay.
You know what I'm saying? So it wasn't just the standard. It was handheld. I'm holding, drop. The guy trigger fires it. They dropped one round in. Tink, tink, tink. He's waiting for the gunner to fire it. He gets the next round, and there was the other gun was so close that he heard him half load, boom, fire. And he's like, he heard half load to that gun, and he reached over to this gun, put the round in there, and that's when the guy fired, and he came up and hit the bottom of the round that he was holding, and then detonated in the tube.
Man, it was. I think there were 6 Marines killed in that, right? There was quite a. There was, yeah. Man, so you want to kind of go back and explain kind of the whole situation there? I guess you kind of did it right there, but is there any other details you want to explain for maybe the people that don't know what we're talking about?
Well, I mean, so the reason why there were so many people that were killed, the position that they had was behind some small hill or whatever, that they couldn't put all 3 guns safely. So one of the guns didn't set up, and they were hanging around the gun that ended up exploding. So there was a bunch of other guys that were hanging around, looking around, that ended up getting killed because they were either supposed to be on the other gun that wasn't being used or whatever. And it just goes to show that, mortars, guys that know mortars, when that first round goes off, your butthole puckers like, oh God, please let that thing land where it's supposed to. And like, oh God, there's a weight off my shoulders.
I bet, man.
Because you could do stuff all right. I mean, I did it out 29 pounds where I had, section leader out there, senior guy, and he set up on the wrong stake. We're sitting there, we're looking, bang, bang, bang. And then way over here, boom. I was like, who, what? Oh shit, what gun was that? And went back, and he just put the sight on the wrong stake, and it was all set. If that was the right stake, he would have been good. But just things can happen. And
I was, what really surprised me about that was the amount of people that got killed after, because I was there. I wasn't there in the gun position. I was on the other end of the hooks. I was on the OP in 2000. It was 2010 when the howitzer exploded at Fort Bragg. That was our guys' mission and stuff like that. And then we didn't have anyone get killed, thank God. And, we were lucky, obviously, in that situation. But it was crazy knowing that a 155 round had an in-bore explosion and didn't kill anybody. But then that mortar, which is, way smaller, it was a 60. Obviously, they were doing handheld. And it was a 60, and it killed that many guys, man. That's just so tragic.
And they were trying to blame it on that because it was the new lightweight tube that the Marine Corps had gone to, and like, oh, what was the other one? It wouldn't have happened. No, that tube is not meant to hold the explosion of a 60mm mortar from blowing up. You know what I'm saying? So the nose cone hit the bottom of the round that the guy was holding, and then detonated as if it was hitting the ground. So I don't know if all the powders blew up, but the round didn't blow up in the instance you're talking about, whereas this whole thing detonated as it was supposed to inside the tube.
Well, the incident I'm talking about, the round exploded in the tube as well. But what happened was, obviously, I mean, the breach wasn't closed, so some of the energy, the breach actually sheared off, if you can imagine that, which is a huge hunk of metal. So anyone that's a 0811 or worked around a howitzer knows that that's a big deal. Not only did the breach shear off, so let me start over. When this happened, these two guys, they were loading the round. They were loading, and the two loaders, when they went to ram it, what happened was the point detonating fuse on the artillery round, after it spins a certain amount of time, sets, kind of like a 203. You're obviously familiar with that. This one came as a defect from the manufacturer and already had been set. So when they rammed it, it exploded from that pressure of it hitting the ring inside, and stopping. And the two loaders took the brunt of it, and also the corpsman. So the corpsman that was there, the position corpsman, was actually on that gun hanging out, and he was standing right behind the breach when they loaded it. So I think he almost died. I think he had the worst injury. I think he broke his femur, might have cut his femoral artery too. I know they had to tourniquet him and stuff like that. So anyway, round exploded. It sheared off the breach, which is crazy. And it took the tube of a 777 and threw the tube, like I think 100 or 200 yards in front of the gun. Like it blew the tube off, and somehow, man, no one died. It's like, I don't know, man. We got super lucky that day.
I think some of it is the
pressure,
the pressure being able to go out the front and the back, whereas there was nothing to go. There's nowhere to go for the mortar down because it's sealed, and that guy had the hand up there, and it just
So my question I was going to get at too was, does the mortar not have a safety that it has to spin a certain amount of times, or is it's just ready to go as soon as
you fire it?
Man, that does make it even more sketchy. I didn't know that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Unless you have it, there's some that have it's like a proximity fuse that you can set that it'll detonate. So much before it senses the ground. But that wasn't what they were firing.
Yeah, man. Just to pop back into you going to Fallujah in 05. What was the city like then? This was when were you there in 05?
September. We got there at the end of September, and I left.
So just under a year after the big battle of Fallujah. Yeah. What did the city look like there? And I guess you were kind of there during its kind of rebuild phase, right? When they're still trying to recover from the mass battles that took place on the streets.
Yeah. So I didn't go out as much as I would have liked, but we would go out once a week or so as what they called it, the Exos Roadshow. We left Camp Baharia, which was adjacent to Camp Fallujah. It was one of Saddam's kids' little summer resort. There was a lake there and a bunch of little lake houses and stuff.
Crazy.
But so I didn't get out there as much. But from what I saw, there was so when we first got there, the north side of the city was ours. We had a security area on the other side of Mobile or Michigan, I can't remember which one, the highway that went around it. And then we also had Sacagawea, which was northwest of the city. And then about a couple weeks before I left, 2-7 left, and we took over the whole city and got rid of the northern security area. So the north side of the city, the guys were going out on patrol, handing out candy and other stuff. When we took over the southern half of the city, that was like holy night and day, get the stink eye and all that. And it was almost, kind of going back to some of my buddies that were with like 3-1 that did the second battle of Fallujah. They were trying to be nice on the north half of the city. And then when they crossed this one road, they're like, we're done taking casualties. We're just going to kill everything and destroy everything. So it was almost a sentiment of like how they were when they were going through that battle.
Yeah.
The people on the north were kind of nicer, more friendly to us. But in the south side, it was like stink eye, and you better watch out wherever you go.
That was like the hardcore dudes were down there.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
And even just the civilians just remembered, like, okay, I came home. Why does, Habib, who lives in the north, his house is okay. Mine in the south is rubbled, and we're in the same city. So just, what those guys came back to, what the Iraqis came back to. And
yeah, by the time they got to that point, like you said, they got tired of taking casualties. So it became, I think, and I can have somebody that was there come on and talk more about it. My buddy Michael Hanthorne came on. He was in one of the first podcasts, in the first 10 podcasts. He was he comes on and talks about it some. He was a motor T operator that got assigned to do mortuary affairs while they were there. Yeah. And man, he discusses some of that. I know, dude. Yeah. He said I think their team or their company or platoon or whatever it was that they made up ended up cleaning up like 600 dead bodies, 600 or more dead bodies there, and putting them in the potato factory, I guess, over there. That's where they stored them and stuff. But anyway, what they were saying, they took so many casualties up front that it became like, dude, we're not going into a house until an explosive has gone into the house first. And that's, so what you're saying is probably completely correct. Like, people in the South are coming back to rubbled buildings and stuff because if there was a fighter in there, guys got tired of, first guy goes in, takes some rounds from some guy that's been waiting in a corner with a PKM all day for you to come in that door. Yeah. They're not going to fuck with that anymore. So they're throwing in C4 charges or throwing in grenades, or they got a tank coming in and shooting a main round into it. Like, man.
One of the guys that I was in 2-2 with later, I helped him with his gunner package. He became a gunner. Was in Bravo 1-8, I think it was, during that battle. And there's a picture of him by either candlelight or something, and he's writing. He's got a cigarette hanging out. And someone's like, oh, hey, Gunny, was it going to time? You writing a love letter? And he got really serious and this is not going to go well for this kid. Oh, man. And he's like, no, I was fucking crossing names off my fucking platoon roster of guys I lost that day. They started out with 38 or 39, almost a TO platoon, and left with under 17.
That's crazy. Well,
not all killed, but killed or wounded, but to include his platoon commander.
That's tough, man. It's that's one of those battles that are going to be forever, talked about. And the guys that were there, the unfortunate thing for the guys that were there is that no one else is going to be able to understand it. Yeah. Even though, like I said, my buddy Hanthorne, we talk about it and stuff like that. There's no way I can ever understand what that was like for him and what, that level of fighting, you know, because a lot of us have been shot at and stuff like that, but to have, you're talking about for weeks, sustained fighting and sustained casualties and losing guys and man, that's just tough. There's so many tragic stories and so many, I mean, honestly, good stories too that have come out of that battle. There's, I don't know, the heroics there are just out of control. It's hard to even fathom, you know, like what that was like. And I was in Iraq, but I never got to, I was a TQ the whole time. I was a mechanic loser at the time. You know, I was just doing their turning wrenches.
Everybody's got to do their job.
Right? I know. And they told us that, but you know, being a guy that was a mechanic that didn't want to be a mechanic, it was very hard to believe hey man, you're helping out the war by fixing these trucks. And I'm like, fuck these trucks, man. I just want to be out there. You know, so I never actually got to see Fallujah and you know, kind of what it had transpired there and what it looked like in the aftermath. But I'm sure even by 2009, I'm sure some of it was cleaned up, but I'm sure a lot of it was still, that was when I was in Iraq. I'm sure a lot of it was still destroyed and stuff like that. But so yeah, man. After you left, you know, you got sent to gunner school. Did we talk about, I listened to like half the podcast we did already. Yeah. I want to talk. So if we feel free to take the reins and kind of just talk about whatever you want, man. This is your second time on. I listened to our first podcast, but I feel like I've done so many now. I feel like stuff's bleeding together, and I'd hate to think that we covered something from your time that we didn't. So, floor is yours.
So let me go back to Somalia, and I don't remember. So I was the platoon. We were there. We were leave. They were gone. We were there now. Our philosophy and their philosophy of defensive positions were different. We'll just say that. So the roof of the embassy had a one sandbag thick wall, and we're like, that's probably not what we need. We built ours up, but when I first got there, I was like, we need to get the DMs and others to do some field sketches of what's going on out here, you know. And my thought process was, as we're going through to do this, we can take this. And a month from now, we can look and see, was there another pile of rubbled rocks? Was there holes put in this building that's right next to our post for them to shoot out of? You know, we can kind of look and take that, and if we did it in detail enough, and I kind of broke it up different spots to different guys so they can get in detail instead of trying to have one guy do this whole huge area. So I'm sitting out there one day. We had a regular post stander on the roof, just one of the regular Marines. And I'm sitting there, and I'm looking out. I'm still observing what's going on. And up on Afgoy Road, a bunch of dudes in trucks stopped. They got out. They got behind piles of rocks, and then they started bounding from pile to pile, all the way down to a wall that was, you know, to my right now. And it was, I think that was called Market Street. Dead Cow was the road in front of us because there was a dead cow on it years ago. And then Market was the one that went into the Medina Hospital District. So they bounded all the way down. They got on that wall, and one guy came up behind each guy and like tapped them and like pointed, went down along the line. And I'm sitting looking at the post stander, and he's just observing, you know, but not really saying anything. Then they pull back, they talk, then they get in the vehicles and leave. And I was like, so, dude, you going to call that in? We'll call it in. They never shot anything. I was like, dude, they bounded all the way down. They assigned sectors of fire, and then they did a debrief and left. You don't think that's pretty important?
Yeah.
Oh, shit. You know, and that was thing one. That ended up later on getting all the snipers, me, the two other snipers, the DMs, and the guys who went through ARS to get up on the roof and be on the roof permanently. So that was thing one. Thing two was one of the corporals of the guard had just dropped guys off at the embassy and was coming around. And he had his back then was regular film. And he saw a dump. He was just taking pictures of like technicals driving by, a vehicle that had a machine gun mounted in the back. And he was up there and he saw a dump truck go by with the ZSU 23 TAC 4 fucking 4-barrel gun mounted in the back of that sucker. Yeah. And took some pictures of that and came back and reported it to the intel guy, my buddy Mike. And then they ended up giving that to the CIA. They sent it off, and within 2 days they came back. Yes, this thing will chew through our inman walls in a heartbeat. We need to be alert for this. And that was the last straw that I went to the platoon commander. I was like, hey, sir, nothing against the guys that are in the platoon, but we need to have the trained observers on the roof because they're missing shit like this, and
that's a huge deal too. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. Those aren't little things to miss. Those are, I mean, you're missing major military, that, I don't know, that should tip you off for sure. Did you
Oh,
guys
yeah.
have to engage? Did you guys receive any attacks from any of those vehicles that were driving by and stuff like that?
Not there. We got one of our convoys got hit, and we were, one of the vehicles returned fire because we were going so fast. Everybody else was like, did somebody shoot? What? And the vehicle that the rounds flew over, they could hear the crack. They saw the guys, and they returned fire. But we were going so fast because speed was our friend. We ended up not going through the city very much. We'd come out of our compound, turn left, go up to 24 October Road, turn left, and then we went about a mile down the road. That went into the desert. We bypassed the whole city and hit the coastal road and came into the airport. So we minimized our exposure to the deep city as much as we could.
What's 24 October Road?
That was just the name of the road. I think there was some kind of ambush. Those are the names of the road that I can't remember. There was something that happened on 24 October that day on that road that ever since then they've kind of always, remembered that as the road.
Interesting. Now, when you guys were there, so Black Hawk Down is one of those movies that has probably inspired thousands upon thousands of people to join the military. Just because you see the movie and you're like, wow, that's amazing. I would like to do some of these cool things. Obviously, it's a tragic story. Multiple Americans were killed, and stuff like that. But just the personalities within the movie and stuff like that, I think a lot of people saw that and was like, I'd like to be like that guy. I think that looks cool.
Yeah.
And my point is that a lot of people have seen that movie. They've seen how, like, when the Blackhawks went down, the difficulties of the convoys of trying to get to those helicopters and recover the survivors and those that were deceased. Can you kind of describe what it was like driving through the city? Like, if you did have to go through the city, like, I guess for people that have never been to a third world country, it's kind of hard to not, imagine driving through town here in San Diego is way different than driving through, like, me going through the bazaar in Afghanistan. It's it's like a wild animal over there. So can you kind of talk about some of the issues that you had there?
Yeah. So again, a lot of times, even if we're going to meet or take the ambassador, a lot of times, especially if in the northern Mogadishu, we would leave the compound, drive around, come into the port, cut through the port to the airfield, and then he'd fly there to limit his exposure and time in those vehicles. And then we'd leave the northern side of either the port or the airfield and then go through the northern side of the city. And part of my job as the assistant convoy commander was calling in all the checkpoints. So I had in grease pencil, I wrote on the inside of the windshield the location and then what the call word was, what the pro word was for that intersection. So they would know as they're following us on the radio as we're going through the city where we were in case they had to send a react, where our last call was, and a couple times we'd sit there and we're supposed to go right. Shit's blocked off by some burning tires. We're going left, and I'm looking at now. I'm looking at a map. I'm trying to follow the map. That road's not on the map. I'm trying to looking out, crazy because back streets and stuff that's not on the map that we had. And it was quite scary.
They talk about the locals and the militias there, like, blockading the roads with stuff. Did you ever run into something like that?
We did. Like I said, on a couple different occasions. That's where we got taken off our route that we were planning because they had stuff going on or either whatever, fires burning. They saw us. Let's disrupt the Americans coming through. They definitely could go that. When our platoon first got there, they sat us down in the little TV room, and one of the CIA, I think it was either CIA or one of the counter intel Marines that was there working kind of undercover, brought us P3 Orion imagery and videos of the Black Hawk Down incident going on and how quickly it goes from roads clear to everything's blocked off and you're fighting for your life. And that was the big reality check when we first got there. Like, because you at that point you heard about it, you saw it on the you saw it in the news and pictures or whatever and diagrams in the newspaper, but it wasn't real until you're there and you're like, oh, shit can come out of nowhere. Very fast.
What people thought were like a ragtag militia actually had a pretty good support network and communications network where they'd signal each other. I think there was a pretty good signaling network that anytime the Americans would do anything, they kind of knew about it and they knew where like kind of the direction they were heading and stuff like that, know, because of their spotters and stuff. You know, because that country is so war torn, there's militias. You know, David Armstrong came on and talked about going into like the arms bazaar, like they had to go through and do a raid in an arms bazaar and stuff like that. You know, things like that being like kind of the norm there. How can you even identify like what is truly an enemy and what may be just someone like carrying a weapon to defend themselves or something like that? Or if that's even, is that even a thing?
So for us, it was the violence of action portion of our ROE. Like you said, everybody, you know, 9 times out of 10, someone's carrying. It's just what their actions are as they have that weapon. If it's down slung, as soon as you see them grabbing the front and grabbing the pistol grip coming up, that was your signal that you're able to engage or whatever.
The group that you saw doing a rehearsal, you know, and then them assigning their fields of fire, would that have been considered a hostile act? Could you have engaged those people at that point?
No, because they weren't shooting at us, and so it had to be us or like a UN force. And so they weren't firing, they weren't shooting at all, they weren't doing anything, but it was like, you know, a big eye opener for me. And everybody else about how organized they can be.
Yeah, and how they'll play around the rules, right? You know, that's a thing a lot of guys ran into in Iraq and Afghanistan when you'd see they'd have civilians or even children sometimes be spotters, you know, with a cell phone and binoculars. They don't have a weapon per se, but they're actively, you know, engaging, you know, or involved in the engagement that's occurring. And sometimes, you know, they'd have to take them out and stuff like that. So, yeah, I was just wondering like how the ROEs work towards something like that. It's, yeah, again, man, you know, I mean, I know there's most of the people that listen to this are probably military, but for the people that aren't, it's hard for you to fathom that, you know, going to a separate country and seeing like a 15-year-old with a pair of binoculars and a cell phone, and that's an enemy fighter. You know, he's actively spotting and, you know, adjusting mortars or something on positions, or, you know, prepping to initiate an IED attack, which is obviously another concern that we had throughout, you know, the last 20 years. Right. Did you guys have any concerns like that, like mines or anything while you were there? Was that an issue?
No.
No, just direct attacked.
Right. I mean, and it was kind of cool. We ended up getting what they called Ranger vests. So I guess, I don't know if the Rangers left them when they left, but it had a sewn-in SAPI plate in the front. We also had their fully armored Humvees that they left as well. Okay. So
that was probably something new at the time.
It was. I mean, so we had those. We also had one built from the manufacturer as a fully armored Suburban, and we had a secondary. So that was dark blue, and light blue was Suburban that they screwed in some extra armor after the fact. That was our backup. So if there was, you know, if the ambassador was going, he was going in dark blue. If there was other dignitaries that couldn't fit in dark blue, they went in light blue. But a lot of times we didn't bring light blue out just because it wasn't as effective.
Okay. Huh. That's pretty interesting. You know, did you feel like your mission was justified, or, I mean, going there, when you walked away from that, when you left there, was it worth your while?
I think so.
Do you think it was worth having the Americans there, the presence there?
Well, I mean, for what we were doing, we were there guarding the embassy. I mean, and it started out because of the warlords fighting back and forth and stealing food and all the famine that was going on. So that was the initial reasons why the U.S. went there. So, I mean, it was, everybody's like, hey, all these people are dying of starvation. We need to get in there. And then from that to, we were just there guarding the ambassador and our compounds and him as he went out in town. And then in the end, he lost faith. Either he did or the State Department not just lost faith in us, but in faith in anything will get done with the leaders that are there. So he ended up pulling the embassy out.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, man, that's crazy when they get to the point where they're going to shut down an embassy and stuff like that. Yeah. So, and I don't want this to be a political thing or anything like that, but you saw, obviously, you know what happened at Benghazi and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. As someone that has experience in that and you know kind of what the steps are being taken, you know, that people don't hear about, like, hey, there's an attack happening. There's obviously all kinds of stuff that's happening in the background, you know, going to fix that. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts on that attack and kind of how that transpired and stuff? And, you know, and how the people that were involved, the decisions to support them sometimes came down to like, well, these are contractors. They're not American, whatever. Like, what's your take on that? And again, I don't want this to be I don't want you to get super political or anything like that. I don't want it to be that kind of discussion.
For me, it kind of hit home only because of my time in Somalia and guarding the embassy and the ambassador and other dignitaries when we went out in town. It definitely hit home. I was just thankful that when I was there, when we pulled the embassy out, we ended up having 2 AC-130 gunships in support of us while we were doing that, which was kind of cool. But going back to your question, I mean, that definitely hit home, and it has guided some of my decisions on where I vote and where I don't vote because of that. But like, what about this? Did all these good things? I was like, well, you know what? I still can't get past the fact of, because it hits home with me, that they didn't send those guys in to help them out. Well, they didn't know. That's armchair quarterbacking it. When they say I need help, you didn't know that in 8 hours it's going to be over, or 10 hours it's going to be over. Send them and then go from there.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and the thing too is that I think a lot of people forget is not just MSG. There's not just the MSG guys doing it. There's not just Fast Company guys that are responding. You have the CRF, which is something that I guess a lot of people don't really realize or know about. What is that? The Commanders Response Force or something like that?
Yeah, the CIF, Commanders in Extremis Force. So if you can't get one of the other tier units in there, then they launch those guys because they're closer and they're able to do that.
Yeah, I don't know if any of those units were ever activated and actually kind of pushed forward.
From the stuff that I saw and the reports I've read, they were alerted but never given the execution order.
Yeah, because they didn't think there'd be enough time to get there or something like that, right? Well, and I think they said they tried to scramble some jets out of Italy that were on kind of on a standby.
Yeah, I think some of it was the DoD was ready, but they were waiting for the thumbs up from the State Department to say they can go, and that never came.
Oh, okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because the State Department has the lead on all that.
Yeah. So because that ambassador is like the president of the U.S. in that country. He's a direct representative of the president in there. So the State Department gives you the thumbs up or thumbs down whether you can go in or not, and then you can launch. So from all the stuff that I read, it was more the DoD was ready to go. It just they were never given the okay to go, and then even in the end, they sent a fast platoon to Tripoli and not Benghazi, but they got jerked around back and forth. Camis on. No. Go put your civvies on. No. Go put your camis on. And they went back and forth into a couple different, changes of uniform before they finally launched and got to Tripoli the next day.
Okay. You know what sucks about, that whole situation and everything like that is at this point, it doesn't matter what comes out about it and, the facts of the matter, because it's become so political that any points brought up now are automatically just kind of like, whatever, man, it's over. It's happened. We've already had that argument. Everyone is kind of mentally tired of talking about Benghazi and who did what right, who did what wrong and stuff like that. And it's very unfortunate that, situations like that become political talking points. Yeah. And the fact is that people still were killed and that, it's something that probably shouldn't have happened. And, I don't know, man. It's tough. It's tough. Oh, yeah. It's tough to see. And it makes you, again, and kind of like the hearing about the Marines that had to were told to give up their weapons to the Yemenis before they could leave the country. Yeah. Like, that's something you hear about happening and you're like, what? We don't do that. Like, what? What do you mean? We would never give up our weapons. Like, we would never leave 4 people in Benghazi, but it happens, and it's just, man. Yeah. Well, hey, man, we're getting at the 2-hour mark, maybe a little over. I'm not sure since we restarted here. Yeah. Is there anything else you want to talk about? Like, we don't have to stop right this second. I just want to kind of.
I guess we can maybe finish out on Somalia. A couple other kind of cool things that we did. So once we got our platoon commander to come to it was me, another school trained sniper, 3 guys that had gone through the DM course. One of those guys went through ARS, Amphibious Reconnaissance School, and then another guy had been through ARS only. We broke up into two-man teams and 6 on, 12 off it ended up being like 3 weeks or a month. But in that time, we were sitting there and we'd hear gunfire and we'd shoot an azimuth and get an estimated distance. And we'd write down in the logbook, and we kind of tracked firefights throughout the day. And we turned our logbooks in to the intel guy, my buddy Mike, And he kind of was able, by that track, where the different clans were fighting. So we can say if we had to go out in town, hey, I try to avoid this area because the last 4 days there's been fighting right over here or right over here. The other thing we did was if we reported on a vehicle, like, hey, the brown Toyota with the 12.7 Dishka on it.
Mm-hmm.
If we saw that more than 3 times, we gave it a number. Then we'd see, okay, then we put it on a list. And then we, at the beginning of each day, we'd get that list that the intel guys would gin up. Okay, I see technical number 2. So we don't have to write all the big description of it. We just put technical number 2 and go on. We had a large list of the technicals. We could, at that point, we were able to figure out what clan was doing, what vehicles belonged to. And then we were also able to figure out that, hey, there might be an asterisk next to that one because that same vehicle, they've mounted 3 different weapons on it. But it took us a little while to figure that out. But just being observant and seeing what's going on and tracking all those things.
Yeah, man, that's the fun part, right?
Yeah.
Keeping track of everything and trying to hey, was that the one we saw before?
Yeah, and so we had the list, and we could kind of write the detailed list. I mean, I still have the lists. I still have my sketches from when I was over there.
Really?
Yeah.
That's awesome, man.
We ended up.
That's one of those things you got to frame up and put in your little man cave or whatever.
Yeah.
Nobody will know the significance except for you.
Exactly. Towards our time when we're let me back up. We were out in northern Mogadishu, and one of our, I think it was light blue, the driver, for whatever reason, I think he was talking and ended up rear-ending one of the vehicles. We came to a quick halt, had damage to the front of that vehicle. So we figured out from there where we could go, what compound. There was a compound where the people were friendly to the U.S. The convoy drove, and I stayed out towards one of the intersections with my vehicle. I was the tail. They went down there with, so we had 4 up-armored Humvees and the 2 Suburbans, one of which one of the ones that got damaged. So we ended up leaving that one in that compound. They took all the stuff out there, all the radios, so we had all kinds of different stuff, contingency cans in the back with extra ammo, extra grenades, extra smoke, whatever. Took all that stuff out there and left that there. While they were doing that, and we're sitting up there, and there was a guy sitting, and we pulled him. We got out. My vehicle got out. The guys hit a couple different spots, kind of hard pointed the area. While we're there, we're sitting there, and the kids were playing. And the technical drove by, kind of noted that. And obviously the Somalia guy did. And he got up and put his chair inside. It came by the second time. And he saw that, and he's like, all right, shooed the kids inside, And he was standing there by the door. And it came by the third time, going kind of real slow. By this time, the hair on the back of my neck standing up, like, hey, guys, get ready. We're getting ready to get hit. And got on the radio to the platoon commander, like, hey, sir, you need to pick it up. There's this one that's eyeing us. We're gonna have to engage it here soon because it's got that look. And as that thing pulled off again, he closed his front door and he came to the window close to where I was. He's like, soldiers from the sea, we want no death here. Slammed the shutters, locked the shutters. You can hear him shooing the kids in the back of the house. I was like, all right, boys, we're getting ready to get hit.
Oh, man.
And as that vehicle came around the corner, the rest of the convoy came up and in view, and it saw them. And it's not just one vehicle. There's a whole bunch of them. We're out of here, and turned and took off. But you always hear, the atmosphere changing. You could definitely, that day, I was one of those, oh, shit, it's definitely changing. And the hair in the back of my neck was standing up. And
that's that weird feeling you get of that impending attack. Mm-hmm. When I was in Afghanistan in 2013, I remember we'd be at one of the patrol bases or doing something with our Afghan partners, and all of a sudden you'd just see all the women and kids leaving. You'd look out from the compound wall or something and just see literally all the women and kids. Some of them would have goats or something in trail, and they're leaving the area, and you're like, oh shit, dude, it's about to. I'm radioing back to COC hey, can I get air? I need something. I don't know what's about to happen. I'm seeing kites go up because that's what they would signal people with over there with black and white kites and shit. And man, it's hard to explain that feeling that oh shit, something's about to happen kind of feeling that. And it's crazy too for the people. It sucks. It's man, they're living in that, and that's their reality, and it's in the States. I'm less sympathetic towards people. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, hey, if you're not doing well in this area, if you can't afford this area, you can't find a job in this area, move to another part of the country. It's, it's not that hard. It's easy. there, man. You can't just move. No. Like if you're a farmer, if you're a dirt farmer in the Sangin Valley, where are you going? You can't, and it sucks. It's like all these women and kids and stuff like that, and men too that aren't even involved. They're just trying to live their life, get involved and wrapped up in it, man. It's just, a situation like, and it sucks. Like your situation when you're with these people, I'm sure at some point after you left, they got a visit. And it was like, why the fuck were these dudes here kind of situation, And it's like you almost inadvertently put these people in danger, without meaning to or having good intentions and stuff like that. Yeah, it's very unfortunate. Dude, yeah, I can't imagine what that was like, dude. I never had to deal with like a ZSU or anything like that or, only in training for ZSUs. But
we had, dude. I'll do one more, then we can cut it off if you want. We were sitting there, and in the other section had received fire one day, took shots, and they returned fire. And they're like, hey, we were getting rifle grenades shot at us. And then they were literally shooting rifle grenades at those guys. And the RSO, regional security officer, he's like the head of security for the embassy and any U.S. personnel in the region. I want to go see this crater. So we're like, there isn't going to be a crater. It's a freaking rifle grenade. It hit, blew up, and he's not going to be. He's thinking like a mortar with a big hole, and he's like thinking of World War II. And so we're like, well, there's nothing. But my squad was on convoy and react. So we had just gone to the city or to the airport for something, and came back. And the Marine Corps Security Force Battalion. CO and sergeant major were there. The CO, even though it was a battalion, it was a full bird colonel, and then the sergeant, his sergeant major. So the colonel went out with us in the morning to the airfield and came back. I'm like, all right, we're gonna take the RSO out, and the colonel's getting ready to come in. He's like, I'm going with them. And sergeant major, what are you doing? He's like, the hell you are, sir? You went out this morning. It's my turn to go out. So he was going out with us. We were gonna literally outside our wall. We're gonna go out and around and outside our wall, and it was our wall, Dead Cow Road, and marking off this way into the Medina Hospital area. And so that was probably from our wall, maybe 100 meters, if that, from our wall to where that walled area and urban area began. Otherwise, it was the open area where they had the little rock piles. So we pulled up. Our 4 vehicles go out there. The lead vehicle, Cobb, God rest his soul, ended up committing suicide years later. But he's in the lead vehicle. They stop. The ambassador, the RSO gets out. They're holding security. So he's in there. The sergeant major, who's a Vietnam vet's in there. And it was like you hit a hornet's nest. And shit and people started coming out everywhere. They called react for the rest of the platoon to come up, man the wall, because they thought we were going to fight our way back to the compound from that little bit. We saw that. We pulled back, and as he's sitting there, Cobb was saying later on, he's like, "Man, I was effing terrified," because it was like out of nowhere, like 1,000 people showed up, most of which were armed. My one buddy Mike was the intel guy. Was like, "Man, I saw a dude carrying an RPG, and like 5 or 6 dudes in a train behind him, just carrying 2 or 3 extra rockets."
That's crazy,
we're like,
dude.
Oh, hey, we were sitting out there like, this is about to get serious. And he said he was sitting in there looking, and he looked down at the sergeant major. Well, shit, he's a Vietnam vet. He's cool, calm, and collected. So I'm going to be cool, calm, and collected. In the end, we backed up. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I'm saying in the end, we backed up a little bit to de-escalate a little, some of the situation. Like, hey, we're not coming. I think they thought we were coming into the Medina Hospital area to do some clearing. And we went right to the edge just so we had a strong point right there with one of our 50 cals. It was a 50 cal or Mark 19. I think it was Mark 19 because of a previous ambush where they ended up engaging guys with a Mark 19 in the K7 circle, and the rounds hadn't been able to turn enough to arm, so they were punching holes through guys because they were so close, and they thought that was the size of the bullet. So some rounds hit dudes, punched through, and other ones hit and detonated.
Jesus.
So
that's crazy.
So even though the 50 cal probably kill you, further out, they weren't as afraid of that as were the Mark 19. They thought that was the size of the bullet coming out of you because they found big holes in dudes that were left behind.
Things launching potatoes at you.
So we pull back, and and in the end, cooler heads prevailed. The guy's like, well, it was right here. Well, I can only see a little thing. Like we told you, it was only going to be a little thing. Getting the vehicles to pull back. A couple years, maybe a year later, the sergeant major's doing his post in relief, and we're sitting there, bend kind of style, and he's like, "Hey, I remember you. I remember that day. Do you remember that day?" To Cobb, and he's like, "Yes," saying, "Yeah." He's like, "Man, I remember. I was fucking terrified." But I looked up at you and I said, "Well, fuck, that Lance Cook was cool, calm, and collected. I need to be cool, calm, and collected."
That's funny.
And it's funny because it was the other way around. He used to be down to the sergeant major, like, fuck, he's this hardcore Vietnam vet, recon guy. Shit, I got to be cool like him. And it's just, kind of cool how that kind of played out.
That's how it works too, man. There's got to be somebody that has, they're not freaking out. They're like, "Hey, this is it. This is the situation. Let's work through it and figure it out." Like, you have to be, calm about it. And I actually had one of my guys, I think I've talked about it on here before. We were flying from San Clemente Island back to Camp Pendleton, and we were on 53s. And as soon as the 53 took off, they didn't give us the horse collars, the inflatable vest with the oxygen bottle in case the helo went down in the water. They didn't give those to us. And at first we're like, hell yeah, man. Like, good. I hate wearing that thing anyway. Man, as soon as we went feet wet, something happened with the hydraulics in the helicopter, and it was something that keeps the stick stable so that the helicopter doesn't go all over the place. Well, that stopped, and the helicopter was going back and forth but rocking, so it was just doing this like fucking crazy like dance in the air. And we thought the pilot was going to turn around and land, but he kept going. And this is a 20-minute flight, 30-minute flight back to Camp Pendleton, and I'm looking at the crew chief, and I'm like, man, if this dude freaks out, I'm going to freak out. Because I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I've never been in something like this. Yeah. And we got to the edge of Camp Pendleton, and the pilot had to request permission to cross the 5 because we were going to make an emergency landing because we were having issues, obviously. Mm-hmm. And when we landed, one of the officers on the bird with us, was my Anglico team. He was a 53 pilot, and he got off and just started chewing the pilot out. And then he went back and called the wing and was like, "This fucking dude just flew a whole, helicopter full of guys over water while this was going on, blah, blah, blah." Anyways, but we got out and we're sitting there waiting for someone to come pick us up because that wasn't where we were supposed to get dropped off at. Mm-hmm. And one of my guys was like, "Hey, Staff Sergeant," he's like, "I was watching you," and I was like, "Man, if Staff Sergeant starts freaking out, I'm going to freak out because this is scary as shit." And I was like, dude, I was scared out of my mind too. I was playing it off, but I was like, I had the same thought. I was looking at that crew chief like, this guy's the pro. If he freaks out, I'm freaking out. Yeah. Like, it's weird how that fear and that kind of mentality is very contagious. And if you let it creep in, the situation can turn really bad really quickly with everyone, losing their mind because of whatever it is. So I guess that's just a tip for those listeners out there to if you're in charge, man, remain calm.
Oh yeah. I was listening to a podcast that had Sergeant Major Payne on it, the guy that just got the Medal of Honor. And he was saying, it can go both ways. Fear can be contagious and heroism can be contagious. He said at one point I was sitting there, oh shit, terrified, like, oh, this is not going to be good. And then he saw like, well, he's fucking doing it. Let's go, giddy up. And he went, and then later on, somebody else like, I saw you going, and I was like, all right, let's go. And then if the fear can be contagious and make everybody else stronger and braver, or not, heroism can get you that way, or fear can get you going the wrong way if too many people panic and start freaking out.
For sure.
So dealing with what's the situation in front of me? I got to take care of this, and then go to the next thing. Mm-hmm. Don't look at the big pie. I got to eat this whole pie. I got to eat this one slice first, and then, do the one thing and then the next. Yep.
I think that's one of those things that, back to what we had talked about before, military guys and stuff like that. I think that's something that that's an aspect of what guys miss about the military. Mm-hmm. It's because you're not going to see something like that in the real world. You're not going to, there's not people maybe this is a very generalized statement, but obviously, but there's not people looking to someone else for that courage to do whatever is right next or whatever. I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but you know what I'm talking about. Like that kind of mentality, that kind of thinking process, and that kind of dedication to keep going because the next guy is still doing it doesn't really exist as much in the real world because everyone knows they can just tap out at any time.
The only way that I see that, so a lot of times I don't listen to the radio anymore. I just listen to podcasts, a variety of different ones. I listen to yours and some others, but it was comparing, like, hey, in normal life, I might not do this, whatever it is, but you get in that mob at a protest and it's like, something that you might not
crazy.
Do. It just becomes a mob mentality or herd mentality, I think is the term that they were using. But I mean, so it can be used in in the, like, oh, this guy's leaving, I can leave. Let me leave. But if it's like, oh, he's throwing a bottle, nothing's happened, let me throw a bottle too. And guys that haven't been over to see what we've seen, get the excitement from that. Well, they threw a Molotov cocktail at the Portland mayor's apartment complex, nothing happened. Well, let me do mine, and then it just escalates from there.
Yeah. I was telling somebody, I was like, a lot of these riots are just because kids are tired of being locked up. There's no concerts and festivals for them to go to. There's none of these events that me as an 18 or 19-year-old I would have been going to. So it wouldn't surprise me if 18-year-old me would have been at one of these protests, like, getting in on the fun, I guess, of it. But yeah, man, it's different when you're kind of in and you kind of see a different side of everything. But anyways, I appreciate it again, man. Thanks for coming on. We definitely have to have you come back on in a couple months, catch up, and you have to become one of my regular guests because I enjoy the conversation and stuff like that. And appreciate you sharing your stories. And it's just crazy stuff, man. Somalia, freaking Iraq, Afghanistan. You made it to gunner. You did sniper school. That's awesome, man. That's legit. Yeah. And I know the listeners really appreciate it too.
I'll definitely look forward to coming back on. I got some other stories about scout swimmer and sharks and other kind of craziness, and so
maybe next time I have you on, I'll try to set it up so we do it for real. We'll do a live one, and I'll announce it beforehand so we can get some people to come in and ask questions during a live broadcast.
That works.
Cool, man. Well, do you want to put your social media out there? Or do you want to throw out any organizations or anything that you want to promote?
Just the one that I did before was a Semper Fi Fund, who helped me out with some of my TBI stuff and everything that I've always seen about them. They're there to help and not necessarily always advertise. So that was one of the things that was important to me. Not always just doing something to get the social media, limelight of it.
Yeah, I think Semper Fi Fund probably comes up more than any other charity or anything else that people talk about when I ask people if they want to, give a shout out to some organization. That's probably the main one that gets brought up. So that's cool. I'm glad they're doing good work. I'm glad they have a good reputation. I'd actually, I knew of their reputation actually before doing this podcast. I'd heard that they had been doing good work. So for those out there, if you're into making charitable donations, maybe consider the Semper Fi Fund and helping them out and some of the stuff they do. For me, just for those out there, make sure as always, check out my website, jkramergraphics.com, and my Instagram is @jkramergraphics and @formeractionguy. So if you got nothing else, man, that's it.
I was going to just say Blaster8541 is what I'm on Instagram, and you can hit me up there if they want.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll put that on the video so people will be able to see it if they're watching the video.
Okay.
Cool, man. Well, hey, have a good weekend. It's Friday.
Yep. Thanks you. Cheers.
Later, dude.